Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Deku Could Nullify Quirk Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Looking across his desk at Inko Midoriya and her son Izuku, who was playing with an all-might action figure, the doctor said, "Madam, we found something strange in regards to your son's quirk." "How so? All the other children in his class have already gained their quirks, but he hasn't shown any signs of my and my husband's quirk," according to Inko. "It didn't seem like your son inherited your husband's and your own peculiarity, Mrs. Midoriya." The doctor stated, "Your son doesn't seem to have a quirk in the conventional sense." At the corner of Inko's eyes, tears began to well up. Had her son no peculiarities? Inko remembered that she had a high school friend who vanished, but since she lacked a peculiarity, the police never tried to locate her by opening a file, and Mistuki was the only friend she had besides Inko. Bakugo. Wiping the tears from her eyes, Inko asked, "Is my son quirkless?" The doctor remarked, No, your son has power, but not the traditional quirk." Examined the results of the various tests his team had conducted. "I don't understand, doctor. What do you mean non-traditional quirk?" replied Inko. "I'll preface this. Has there been odd goings-on within your household?" the doctor asked. Inquired. "You mean like supernatural, strange sounds and lights flickering?" Inko responded. "Not in that sense. Has your or your husband's quirks suddenly stopped working?" said the doctor. "Your quirk enables you to draw small objects towards you," she said, looking over the top paper once more. "Occurred that your quirk would temporarily stop whenever you pulled an object, allowing the object to drop to the ground." Inko considered it. She occasionally pulled a small object or utensil. When her quirk abruptly stopped functioning, she threw a container of spice in her direction. "Well, but I never truly trained my quirk, so I figured that was the reason." The doctor inquired, "Did any of those occur when your son walked into the room?" But Inko gave a shrug. She was more concerned with snagging the object to prevent it from falling to the ground. After giving it some thought, the doctor said, "I think I have an idea to demonstrate." The physician extracted two identical highlights from a pull-out drawer he established. Inko glanced at him after placing them on his desk and said, "If you could pull one of these in your hand, madam." After Inko nodded, the left highlighter blasted into her outstretched hand. For the first time, the doctor attracted the young boy's attention by saying, "Young Midoriya, from the first moment of the meeting, I would like you to hold your mother's hands." Izuku grasped his mother's right hand after placing his all-might action figure in his lap. "Now, I would like you to try using your quirk on the other," the doctor said, turning to Inko. Highlighter. With a nod, Inko attempted to grasp the second highlighter, but it remained in place. "I want you to keep trying to use your quirk, Mrs. Midoriya, young Midoriya on." The doctor said, "I would like to release your mother's hands at the count of 3, Inko went on. To attempt to utilize her quirk as the doctor counted down, 3, 2, 1. Izuku withdrew his hand from Inko, and the highlighter broke as soon as it made contact. Shot straight into Inko's bare hand. It happened so suddenly that Inko instinct ducked, causing the over her head, the highlighter flew. Looking at Izuku, Inko sat back up and said, "So my son's quirk allows him to suppress a person's peculiarity." The physician pushed the file across the desk for Inko to read after saying, in layman terms, "Yes. Examine, genetic changes caused quirks, and research over the years has allowed us to look at a person's genetic code and isolate what part of the genetic code is changed by a person's peculiarity. But your son has a totally different genetic code than this one. Change that has never been observed. For example, a person's genetic code might be altered to read ABCD. Your son's genetic code would be changed to read as ZYXW, not only a different string of code. However, it's the opposite. A person's genetic code is countered by your son's, which reverses the ABCDs into standard ACGTs. Is physical contact the only way it works?" Inko asked. "At the moment, it appears that, but we think Izuku has a region of effort surrounding him. It is ever-changing, like a force field surrounding him, the largest we were able to. Although it can shrink to be a few millimeters away from his skin, the record was 3 meters. Thus, as we recognize that physical contact will always stifle the eccentricity of the other person," the physician stated. "From this, we've come to coin this genetic code and ability anti-quirk. As Inko's eyes widened, the doctor hurriedly asked, "What is something you?" Change is more than welcome. Before sending a complete record to the parents, we consult with them. Choosing a name for their child's peculiarity is part of the QRD discussion. Inko pondered for a moment. Her former friend was despised, harassed, and tortured because not having a quirk. If Izuku could take away other people's quirks, how much worse would that be? "Can we give it the name Null?" Izuku inquired abruptly. "My peculiarities don't work against me, making them as null." Izuku's name and ability might give the impression that quirks are ineffective on him. That someone with super strength could only punch Izuku with normal levels of strength. The doctor remarked, "It does sound heroic. We'll name my son's quirk Null," Inko sighed. As he returned the folder, the doctor said, "We'll submit the file." Izuku and Inko started to prepare, but the physician intervened, saying, "Mrs. Midoriya, if it's okay with you, I would like to ask that you additional testing to determine your son's aptitude. We still don't know much about it. Scratched the surface. We were fortunate enough to find the genetic alteration, but we don't recognize its origin. This might turn out to be the century's greatest discovery, possibly reveal the secret to eccentricities. We can discover more about your son's peculiarity with the help of these tests. Find out how it operates and its limitations, while also allowing your son to gain control over it." Inko was apprehensive because her son loved interacting with children and was a social butterfly. Age. She was unable to remove that and make Izuku's early years consist of rooms with white walls. Going through tests all the time. You would be compensated financially for your time, and your son's aptitude could assist thousands worldwide, the physician continued. "Let me talk to my husband about your offer. We'll reach a consensus by the end of week," Inko remarked. The doctor said, "I understand." After thanking the doctor for his time, Inko and her son left the entire ride. Izuku had a cool-sounding quirk that allowed him to suppress his smile at home. Other person's peculiarity by touching them, or perhaps he could do that simply by being close to them. Sounded even more awesome than the peculiarity of Katsuki Bakugo, his best friend, explosion. With Izuku's Bakugo was unable to use explosives to gain power. Inko instructed Izuku to go to his room at the house, and she went to the kitchen to speak with Hiroshi, her husband. "How did it go, then?" Hisashi remarked as he exhaled flames onto his finger, which he used for gas stove lighting. What Inko said was, "He has a power." Power? Did the doctor use that strange terminology? Hisashi inquired as he withdrawing his finger, he placed a pot of water on top of the lit stove. Izuku's ability was referred to as an anti-quirk by the doctor. He claimed that Izuku's genetic alteration blood is not at all like a typical quirk. Izuku's genetic code, not ABCDs, appears as ZYXWs, Inko remarked. "Now, that's strange. What does he do with this ability?" Hisashi asked. According to Inko, it suppresses people's quirks. Hisashi paused, glanced at his wife slowly, and then spoke in a worried tone. "Suppresses, but doesn't take away." Inko gave a nod of comprehension. The power to remove one's peculiarities for. Most people didn't believe the fable, but Mitsuki and Inko were aware of the reality because that was who had abducted their friends, and they continued to worry that One for All was after them. It goes beyond simple physical contact. According to the physician, Izuku can exert his abilities in create an area around him where quirk becomes suppressed, Inko said as tears started to form at the corner of her eyes once more. Hisashi saw and gave her a hug. "I recall Amaya. I remember what you told me, however, our son will not receive treatment like that," Hisashi remarked, starting to stroke his wife's hair. "Amaya's lack of a quirk led to her being teased. How will our son be handled for stifling others? Quirks are highly valued in this world. How will someone be handled like that? Is it possible to remove that value? So, we assist Izuku in training. Keep it to a minimum and assist him in taking control of this area of his life. In this manner, he only uses physical contact to repress his quirk. We've hidden ourselves from the for this long, boogeyman. What are a couple of kids?" Hisashi made a joke. Hisashi started to back away after Inko nodded, but she later stated, "The doctor wanted to run additional Izuku tests. Says this ability of his could help unlock the secret of quirks, where they originated and how they change. Additionally, he said, they would train Izuku and assist him in gaining control over his peculiarity. He promised to pay us money. It sounds tempting, but there's a reason we live below the median, so that he doesn't discover us. That's why their house and business only have Masaru's name on them. He arrived searching for you previously. We raised our heads once more, and you can bet that he is pursuing us. And now we must keep our son safe. You can bet that if he finds out that Izuku can suppress quirk, he'll come with the intention of stealing it, Hisashi added, and he'll find a way. Yes, I am aware. But ever since he was able to speak, Izuku has dreamed of becoming a professional hero. How can we give Izuku the life he deserves if all we do is hide? Inko remarked as she was wrapping her arms around her husband more tightly. With a sigh, Hisashi said, our son has always been adventurous and just as stubborn as his. That earned him a slap on the back of the head, mother. And he's spirited. In other words, he's not one to take a back seat. He will utilize his anti-quirk to become one of the top pros heroes worldwide. The best course of action, in my opinion, is to assist him, allow the physicians to conduct their tests, they will train him. And if the boogeyman ever follows him, our son will be ready to take a position. Inko remarked, you should have become an author. Hisashi chuckled, saying, if we win this battle, I'll write the book I was working on prior to Izuku's arrival. When Inko dropped Izuku off at kindergarten the following day, he said, have a sweaty, good day. And keep in mind that your ability only prevents you from being impacted by quirks. Izuku didn't know why his parents were making him conceal that, but he said, yeah, Mom, I remember. He went along with it even though his quirk was an anti-quirk that allowed him to stifle other people's quirks. Along with it, Izuku greeted the teacher who was standing in front of her, and she returned the greeting. Then went inside for first period. Izuku entered the room and made his way to the taxis, where after putting his shoes and backpack away, he went to the opening rug, where the classes were assembled. Prior to the start of the class, Izuku waited patiently for school to start because he was among the first to arrive. All of the children stopped talking and turned to face their teacher when the bell rang. Who took a seat in a rocker? Well done, kids, for calming down. Before we start, there's a new oddity in the class. Yesterday, Izuku Midoriya visited the doctor. Would you mind sharing your thoughts, Midoriya? Peculiarity, the instructor said. Izuku grinned as he considered ways to flaunt his peculiarity, saying, I need an assistant. Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's best friend, got up fast and asked, what do you need me to do? Friend. Bakugo and Izuku approached the class leader, and Izuku said, stand here. Bakugo turned to face Izuku after standing where he instructed, saying, all right, so what? Nerd. Hit me with your quirk, Izuku said, still grinning. What scared the teacher more was that Izuku had asked Bakugo to use his quirk on him, or the fact that Izuku had stated it coolly, or that it might cause an explosion. Midoriya, I don't believe your demonstration calls for the need of Bakugo's quirk, eh? As he started to get out of the rocking chair, the teacher said. Yeah, but it does. You saw that my quirk prevents me from being affected by other quirks. If someone It doesn't affect me when they use their quirk to throw a fireball at me, Izuku clarified. The teacher remarked, I'm sure you're misunderstanding what the doctor said. Izuku turned to Bakugo after saying, no, I'm not. Hit me with your quirk. Before the instructor could put an end to this absurd notion, Bakugo raised his hand and let out a huge explosion. Izuku was being hit by the heat and smoke, so the instructor used their to blow the smoke away, the wind quirks. He became so anxious that he called the school nurse to go to the room, but Izuku reappeared as the smoke cleared. When Izuku was revealed, the teacher's eyes widened and the other student began to cheer. Not to be touched. His clothes and skins showed no signs of smoke or burns, suggesting that he had also been unaffected by the heat. Then Izuku bowed and extended his arm, saying, thank you, thank you. After exhaling briefly, the instructor collapsed back into his rocking chair. He started to. At least he wouldn't have to worry about Izuku's quirk unintentionally going off if he massaged his forehead. Additionally, the school was not concerned about Izuku being inadvertently injured by a fellow student's quirk. Leaving. With a sigh, the instructor turned to face Izuku and said, thank you for that demonstration. Midoriya. But let's not do anything else. Okay, Izuku said naively. For the benefit of the teachers, the remainder of the day proceeded without incident, and after school ended. After traveling to Bakugo's house, Izuku and Bakugo explored the nearby forest. Bakugo's residence. Bakugo remarked as they strolled along a trail, "Your peculiarities are truly strange. It makes other people's quirks are useless. Make them Dekus without quirks." Izuku remarked, "Hey, it's not nice to call other Dekus. But it's true. Even if All Might's special ability makes him extremely strong, he could still try to punch you. Then he could only use his inherent strength to punch. When you take away someone else's greatest strength and..." While hiding beneath a branch, Bakugo uttered the words, "Turn it into weakness." Izuku said, "You're not mad about my abilities." "Abilities? But why would I be upset? You can walk if a villain attacks the city. Can you imagine how awesome it would be to approach them despite their peculiarity and strike them across the jaw? Civilians encircled by a flaming fire, a pro-hero powerless to intervene, and then you step in. It would be amazing to see someone literally walk through fire without getting hurt." Bakugo uttered those words. Izuku chuckled and said, "Yeah, that would be pretty amazing to see." Two kept exploring the forest, and the other wanted to share with his closest friends his capabilities were a major concern for Izuku. Indeed, his anti-quirk prevented him from being harmed by other peculiarities, but only as a result of his primary power. His anti-quirk simply prevented the quirk from striking him by suppressing it. They arrived at a creek where a fallen log served as a bridge. Bakugo climbed up on it. "Hey Kachan, there's something I want to share with you regarding my skills," Izuku said. Bakugo remarked, "Why do you keep calling them abilities? They're called quirks." Glanced at his best friends over his shoulder. "Except my powers aren't from a quirk. The doctor called it an anti-quirk," Izuku replied. He ascended the log. "Anti-quirk? What?" Bakugo asked. "The doctor said yesterday that genetic code changes cause quirks in people. However, he claimed that the alteration to my genetic code was the opposite of typical changes." He did his best to explain. "What on earth does that signify?" Bakugo inquired. "According to the doctor, if someone's genetic code is altered to ABCD, I would like ZXYW, Izuku uttered. "That is different, you're correct. Even your code would be inverted, so it would be the opposite." Peculiarity. An anti-quirk, Bakugo remarked, happy that he had figured it out on his own. "The doctor said that my genetic code could help unlock the secrets of quirks," Izuku was told. Stated. Bakugo, who didn't fully comprehend the significance of quirks, uttered the words, "Cool." Why did it matter if people knew where they were from? They were cool. That's not all. Caption. Not only can I ignore other people's peculiarities, but I can also. That's how his mother and the doctor described his anti-quirk, Izuku said. What does suppressing quirks mean? Bakugo inquired. Izuku clarified, I stop people from using them. The world appeared to stop, but Bakugo burst out laughing, saying, Come on, Izuku, being able to prevent other people from using their peculiarities. It isn't feasible. Many of you are immune to quirks, but... Okay. Halting them. According to Kachan, my parents do not want me to tell anyone about that, however, Izuku said, I trust you. And I'm telling you Izuku, stopping people from using their quirks is impossible. Bakugo uttered those words. Izuku stepped forward and took Bakugo's hand, saying, It is and I can prove it. Try using your peculiarity. Bakugo attempted to say, You've already proven you can't be injured by my explosions. To free his hand from Izuku's hold, Izuku's hand was freezing. I didn't mean it me. Just try and use your quirk in general, Izuku replied. Whatever. Bakugo sighed and extended his other hand, attempting to use his peculiarity. Bakugo looked at his hand and extended it once more, but nothing happened. He tightened his whole hand, followed by the arm, in an attempt to trigger an explosion, but regardless of how hard he tried to use his quirk but was unsuccessful. Then he realized that something was missing from Bakugo. In a panic, he tore his. Izuku released his icy hold on his hands and said, You can steal quirks. Izuku said, No, not steal. Suppress. After speaking with him, his parents made sure he was aware of the distinction. Get away from me. Don't suppress my quirk again. It felt wrong. Get away from me. As he staggered back and tumbled off the log, Bakugo said. Fortunately, they had already crossed over. And Bakugo struck the ground rather than the tiny liver. Bakugo slapped Izuku's hand away as he rushed after his friends and offered assistance. You took a piece of me, so get away. That's why your power is called an anti-quirk. Not right. Izuku took a moment to say, Kachan, please, it was just a demonstration. Please calm down. Take a step back. No, you can suppress pieces of people's souls. It's not right. It's the power of a villain. Bakugo shouted. Izuku was struck like a brick wall by that. Others were prevented from using their quirk by his anti-quirk, and Bakugo referred to it as a villain's power. Tears caused Izuku to fall backward and land on his butt. Began to take shape at the corner of his eyes. I just wanted to demonstrate my abilities. I didn't mean to. How I could use my power to stop a villain. Bakugo noticed the tears as he glanced at his friends. It had seemed as though a fragment of his spirit had been taken, but Bakugo felt complete again as soon as the physical contact ended. Bakugo let out a sigh. As he was aware of his error, the next time he spoke, his tone was not as brazen as usual. Hey. Izuku, please accept my apologies. I didn't mean to cause panic, it just felt like there was a void in my soul. What? Izuku asked, lifting his head and glancing at his best friend with teary eyes. It felt wrong and I panicked, and I didn't mean what I said, I wasn't thinking straight. Bakugo uttered those words. Okay, so I won't suppress your quirk anymore, Izuku replied. You mentioned that your parents didn't want anyone else to, so let's do the same for everyone else. It would be difficult to explain if you touched that part of your anti-quirk. Bakugo remarked, someone in their quirk went out. After giving it some thought, Izuku said, I can wear gloves. Bakugo chuckled at his best friend's idea's simplicity, but he thought it might work. Can you picture me approaching a furious villain and simply tapping their nose and peculiarity? Simply stops functioning, Izuku remarked. It was Bakugo's imagination. With the entire world at their knees, a villain delivers a speech solely for. Despite the villain's peculiarity, Izuku will continue to walk through the bloodshed and stop them with a straightforward nose tap. You prevent the villain from using their quirk, so you and I become the greatest pro-hero team. And I eliminate them, Bakugo uttered. Izuku jokingly said, who says I can't take the villain down by myself? Bakugo responded by chuckle. Bakugo stated, we'll see about that. Until it was time for dinner, they kept exploring the forest. Hisashi after supper. He said, hey buddy, your mom and I have been talking, as he picked up Izuku and drove home. Regarding the proposal made by the physicians yesterday, Izuku stated, about how my anti-quirk could unlock the secrets of quirks, he recall. We spoke with the doctor, and he stated that those secrets could be very beneficial in the world. Some people find it difficult to manage their eccentricities, or their illness has a detrimental impact on them. According to the doctor, your anti-quirk might enable those people to lead better lives, Hisashi outlined. Izuku mentioned, the doctor said I could be trained. They would be pushing the boundaries of your abilities, but it won't be to become a pro-hero. Hisashi clarified, anti-quirk, teaching you control and helping your power to become stronger. But if my anti-quirk would be stronger, then I could be a better pro-hero, Izuku stated. I suppose in a sense, but I want you to comprehend these physicians as they train, son. They are more interested in the potential clinical applications of your power, Hisashi stated. Doesn't that mean my anti-quirk would be being used to help someone in pain? Izuku asked. Inquired. Hisashi responded, I guess yes. Izuku questioned, and what's so wrong with that? His anti-quirk would be trained to. Analyzing his quirk could benefit those in need while preparing him to become a pro-hero. Hisashi responded, nothing at all. After returning home, Inko and Hisashi sat at the table while Izuku went to bed. The table in the kitchen. Izuku was all for it, according to Hisashi, so they called the doctor to provide their choice. Inko switched on the speaker and placed her phone on the table. There were several buzzes on the phone. And the line connected after that. Good evening Mr. and Mrs. Midoriya. Both Inko and Hisashi said, good evening, Dr. Ronin. Dr. Ronin said, I hope your call this evening means good news. Yes. We've decided to let you run your tests and help our son prove his anti-quirk. I said, Hisashi said. There was silence on the phone until Dr. Ronin said, I apologize for my unprofessional behavior. Celebration, but I want to express my gratitude for the potential your son possesses. How much it might disclose. We will be taking the financial compensation, Inko stated. Of course. Dr. Ronan said. And we'll be monitoring whatever test you do, heavily, Hisashi replied. Regardless of the test you conduct and the outcomes, we aim to be the first to informed of them. You will also specify with whom you intend to share that information, Inko stated. You mentioned that our son's skills could benefit people with uncontrollable eccentricities or peculiarities that cause harm to the user. We want the last word in any process you develop for that. Hisashi uttered. I understand that both of you are concerned about the procedures, but possess medical knowledge, you might not be able to comprehend the process completely, Dr. Ronan stated. After that, you'll keep explaining it to us until we get it. The anti-quirk of our son is distinct, and we. Inko stated in a firm voice, I don't want the wrong people to find out about it. She didn't want to let that go because some doctor wanted to be famous, even though she wanted to protect her family. Dr. Ronan remained silent for a while before saying, I get it. I get it. The file for your son will be. Others will only be granted restricted access under key lock. The just 3 with complete. As his parents, you and I will have access. Inko exhaled slowly, but it was unclear how effective the doctor's security would be. When do you want us to arrive for the initial examination? Hisashi inquired. If this weekend works for you. Tests should begin as soon as possible. The pair. I have additional blood tests first. The more we comprehend your son's genetic makeup, the better we can comprehend its operation. Regarding the theoretical aspect of this, for the practical. Would like to observe how the various quirk types are impacted by your son's anti-quirk, emitter. Heteromorphic and transformational, Dr. Ronan stated. I am grateful, Dr. Ronan. Hisashi said, we'll see you on Saturday, and hung up. It's going to be okay, he said, reaching over and rubbing Inko's back. I have faith that Dr. Ronan will. Don't reveal Izuku's skills. With a weary tone, Inko said, okay. Dr. Ronan is merely interested in determining Izuku's power at this time. Examine how it functions and what impact it has on other people. The experiments begin once all of that is known. Hisashi remarked, we have time. Inko said, okay. Izuku was wearing gloves when he came down for breakfast the following morning. Izuku responded to Inko's question about why he was wearing snow gloves by saying that it was so he wouldn't unintentionally touching someone and suppressing their quirk. Inko laughed a little and stated that it was a good idea, but for the time being, he won't likely feel uncomfortable in the middle of the day. Izuku simply needs to exercise caution until they can obtain lightweight gloves that won't heat his hands excessively without making contact with his skin. Inko searched for gloves for a week, but the ones that were effective were too costly, and they couldn't afford them, so Izuku had to be cautious about who he touched for the entire week. Bakugo claimed that suppressing his quirk didn't have an instantaneous effect, and even if he didn't, he was aware of what was going on, but he could still sense that something was amiss. If too many people felt that, Izuku might be in for a catastrophe. Fortunately, Izuku survived the week, and on Saturday, he was awakened by his mother telling him to get ready for the doctor. Izuku and Inko had a brief breakfast before went in the direction of Dr. Ronan's office. Inko and Izuku found a parking space and went inside, where Inko spoke briefly with the receptionist, after which Izuku and she were shown to the elevator and given a unique key that allowed them to enter the basement, where an elevator led to a spacious, double-sized white room of their living room, 2 walls of which are lined with white cabinets. Dr. Ronan was waiting near a white coat with 3 other individuals. Dr. Ronan saw them at the table and hurried to his feet, saying, Mrs. Midoriya, young Midoriya, wonderful. You managed to be present. Let me present to you the group I have put together. Initially, we have Drs. Kaizen, Haya, and Yuna. Everybody here is unique in a way that we will investigate for young. The power of Midoriya. You haven't even called young Midoriya's quirk a quirk, power. Maybe you. Dr. Haya stated, I would like to explain now. Young Midoriya's ability here is why I use the terms power and ability. Not your customary peculiarities, Dr. Ronan said. Dr. Yuna remarked, that is a bold claim. How about a demonstration for the time being? We can discuss the genetic specifics later. Which? Will one of you be the courageous volunteer? Dr. Ronan stated. The 3 other medical professionals exchanged glances, but Dr. Ronan had more experience. His morals and ethics were the loosest of all of them, and he was respected in his own right. Any hospital physician. Dr. Kaizen noticed that neither Dr. Haya nor Dr. Yuna were moving. "All right, I'll do it," he said as he moved forward. "What am I supposed to do?" "Easy," Dr. Ronan said. "You must use your quirk, but before you do so, explain how it functions." Dr. Kaizen turned to Inko and Izuku after giving Dr. Ronan a perplexed look, saying, "My peculiarities are referred to as Kai Reader. It enables me to read a person's body energy, which is represented as an electronic system." Dr. Ronan said, "Now use it on young Midoriya." Dr. Kaizen focused on Izuku and used his quirk to make his iris glow yellow, receiving a. He ignored the slight burning feeling behind his eyes and concentrated on Izuku, but the images. Dr. Kaizen pushed his quirk, which caused the sensation behind his eyes to go away. "Grow." He averted his gaze and blinked. As the feeling behind his eyes subsided, Dr. Kaizen said, "I can't." He reactivated his quirk and glanced at Inko. His quirk was successful, and the image materialized. Dr. Kaizen examined the. "When I noticed that Inko was holding her stress in her left arm, I said, 'But I can on Mrs. Midoriya.'" "What is this?" asked Dr. Kaizen, blinking and turning to face Dr. Ronan. "Here, young Midoriya have a special talent that we have come to refer to as an anti-quirk. We feel that he is unaffected by any action that is supported or aided by a quirk we experienced in." Realizing that this included any physical response to, whether hostile or passive, like your peculiarity, Dr. Kaizen, Dr. Ronan remarked. To refer to this ability as an anti-quirk is presumptuous. In the scientific field, one needs to be precise and as specific as possible, Dr. Yuna stated. "That is what we will be doing here," said Dr. Ronan, smiling as he turned to face Dr. Yuna. "It's to learn more about young Midoriya's capabilities. However, the capacity of young Midoriya to be his anti-quirk is not limited to being unaffected by quirk. Dr. Haya, I think your peculiarity would work best for this demonstration. Activate your quirk, just like Dr. Kaizen," Dr. Ronan said. Turned to Izuku and said, "Young Midoriya, please take Dr. Yuna's hand and count to 5 just like you used to. And release." Izuku walked up as Dr. Yuna took a step forward and her feet started to float off the ground. To her and gazed at her extended hand, Izuku started to grab it, but then remembered what Bakugo had described what it was like to have his quirk suppressed, and Izuku didn't want to anger the kind doctor, but in order to display his anti-quirk, this demonstration was required. Rather than holding Dr. Yuna's hand for 5 seconds, Izuku would look at it once more. Only do it for 2. Dr. Yuna instantly fell back when Izuku took her hand. She let out a little cry as she struck the ground, her eyes wide with the sensation. Ground, and Izuku quickly withdrew his hand. Dr. Yuna began to retreat, but as soon as Izuku released his hold, her peculiarity reappeared in. After catching herself, Dr. Yuna stood up and turned to face Izuku, who anticipated that she would be afraid of him or hate him, but she had a look of interest in her eyes. "As soon as Midoriya took hold of my hands, my quirk vanished and I sensed it returning. The instant we lost communication." "That's intriguing," said Dr. Yuna, turning to face Dr. Ronan. "Thank you for selecting me for this kind of research. You see, my fellow doctors, this phenomenon is what we are here to study, to understand why this anti-quirk was bestowed upon young Midoriya. We'll investigate, examine, and test it with young Midoriya's qualities, and if we're lucky, we discover some therapeutic applications to assist people worldwide," Dr. Ronan said, turning to face Drs. Kaizen and Haya. Izuku glanced at Drs. Kaizen and Haya. Dr. Kaizen appeared interested, but one could better characterize Dr. Haya's expression as one of wonder. "Dr. Ronan, where do you suggest we start?" Dr. Yuna inquired. "We begin with 3 tests today. We'll first examine the specifics of young Midoriya's anti-quirk works. Why aren't quirks affecting him? Second, we'll assess young Midoriya's the various quirk types are reacted to by anti-quirk. The peculiarity of professional hero Eraserhead only impacts has no effect on heteromorphic quirks, but emitter and transformation quirks do. Is young Does Midoriya's anti-quirk have the same restrictions? Furthermore, if heteromorphic quirks are impacted, how much? Does it totally or partially remove the mutant changes? Is it possible for young Midoriya to expand these anti-quirk characteristics, creating a field of negative quirk space around him? Lastly, Blood tests will be conducted, Dr. Ronan stated. All right, but how do you suggest we gauge the degree of quirks? We can see the suppression of a person's quirk's visual component, and we can quantify a person's quirk factor through their blood. However, we lack the tools necessary to measure that type of thing in real time, Dr. Haya inquired. After grinning, Dr. Ronan moved to one of the white cabinets and opened it. He took a briefcase and carried it to the table. He unlocked it and took out a gadget that resembled a Geiger counter for radiation. Dr. Haya, I had the same idea you did not long after first talking to Mrs. Midoriya about this, so I contacted a contact of mine who was able to get me in contact with the Quirk Research Department of Island, and they kindly sent me one of. This will give us a better understanding of how their old quirk Geiger counters. Other quirks are being suppressed by young Midoriya's anti-quirk. After turning on the QGC, Dr. Ronan extended the scanner in front of Dr. Hyzen. After the machine beeped 3 times, a number read, "Congratulations, drive." Dr. Ronan then directed the scanner at Izuku, and then the machine. "Hyzen, your AP is at 5,750. Again beeped 3 times. 00000 appeared on the screen that Dr. Ronan then displayed. Dr. Ronan asked, "Now that we have an equal understanding, should we begin?" As he on the QGC, click the scanner again. According to Dr. Yuna, yes, let's. The medical team started by examining the effects of Izuku anti-quirk on other people's peculiarities, and appeared during the initial volunteer round because Inko and the doctor only had emitter quirks, but drive. Ronan had recruited 4 nurses to volunteer, so he was ready once more. The initial 2 had the capacity to extend the index and pinky fingers, creating an electrical arch, is one of the transformation quirks. Between them, as well as the capacity to change their fingers into tiny knives, although the previous 2 had. One of the heteromorphic quirks had a cat-like feature, while the other had feathers for hair and a beak. It was discovered that Izuku's anti-quirk affected both the transformation quirk and the emitter were comparable. With the transformation quirk, the ability was swiftly suppressed. Changing back. Additionally, it was discovered that the initial nurse could not transmit electricity. Izuku's body and the second nurse, who had to move quickly to avoid her fingers changing back, discovered that she could not use her blades to cut Izuku's skin. An intriguing discovery was made with the heteromorphic quirks, regarding her typical nails were very sharp, but by the third nurse, her feline features would vanish. However, she had faint markings in the shape of cat whiskers that appeared to be fake tattoos. As the fourth nurse's feathers vanished entirely, and his beak only grew shorter, but he recently noticed he had trouble moving his jaw and speaking. However, Dr. Ronan hypothesized that as Izuku aged and as the anti-quirk grew stronger, a heteromorphic's characteristics could become increasingly suppressed, so much so that in the first point it seems they had existed at all. The nurses' one commonality was that they said they could sense that there was a problem with their peculiarity, as though a part of their soul was absent, but the adverse effects were not consistent. The initial nurse observed that as his peculiarity was being suppressed, his hair seemed to be tangled with static electricity, and the second nurse's fingers felt not much. The fourth nurse reported feeling heavier, as though he were heavier, while the third nurse reported that her face was itchy. Had put on weight. Izuku's blood was taken toward the end of the session in order to be examined. Additionally, after wrapping Izuku's arm and giving him a juice box, Dr. Ronan gave Inko a Valina. When she opened the envelope, she discovered that it contained yen bills. 300,000 yen. Dr. Ronan replied. Inko cast a worried glance at the cash. Dr. Ronan stated, "You did agree to the compensation." Inko and Hisashi didn't. He found it odd that he wanted the compensation because there weren't many people in the world who would refuse to accept free money. "I know, it's just, I didn't expect it to be so much," Inko replied. "The significance of your son and his anti-quirk may then be demonstrated in the medical. Indeed, we can read a person's quirk factor, but we have only just begun to explore the world of quirks and identify its type. Tests are available to learn how it functions, but they are not always reliable. And yes, that is a synopsis of what we know about quirks. Where did they originate from? Why did they start to show up? Why do certain kids develop a peculiarity that isn't comparable to either parents? and we're limited to those inquiries. I think your son's aptitude will open the metaphorical Pandora's box on how we perceive oddities, Dr. Ronan stated. Then take a look at Inko. If I'm correct, your son's answers will significantly alter civilization. Then using fire to control it. Inko tapped the tiny Velina envelope against her open hand after closing it. Next. Izuku was thrilled when we said, "Thank you, and I don't mean for the money," with a sigh. Informed him that we were doing this. You mentioned that his skills could benefit people worldwide, and he was excited that he could be a hero for others in their time of need. But the world looks at everything. The world will undoubtedly notice if you begin healing people and their peculiarities under a microscope. Press interviews are a part of media and news, so I'm wondering if you can explain everything without my son's involvement. Dr. Ronan remarked, "I'm sure I'll be able to come up with something." Inko remarked, "I hope you do. Because the world would inevitably find out if he couldn't." About Izuku, so it was inevitable that villains would find out about her son. He would eventually find out about her son. And Inko had already lost one person close to her to that monster. Dr. Yuna and Izuku approached Mrs. Midoriya and said, "Your son is all set to go. Izuku is on his second juice box," and Inko and Dr. Ronan say, "He might be a little light-headed for the. He should be fine by the end of the day, but make sure he has dinner and goes to bed early tomorrow morning." Then Inko bowed and took her son's hand, saying, "Thank you, doctors." They strolled to the elevator and once back on the ground floor headed home. The group consisting of Drs. Ronan, Yuna, Haya, and Hizen continued to investigate and test the anti-quirk of Izuku. They studied the different effects it had not only on the quirk, both the user and itself. Dr. Ronan observed that users frequently expressed feeling completely the opposite of their peculiarity. Warmth was experienced by those with ice-based quirks and coldness by those with fire-based quirks. Those with animalistic mutant quirk felt their animal instinct become docile. Izuku's anti-quirk was influencing the quirk's mental changes in addition to its physical characteristics. The user who had certain peculiarities. Additionally, although Izuku's blood could provide some additional insight into his peculiarities, the development of the, at best, discovery was minimal and slow. The most significant development in comprehending Izuku's anti-quirk was written by Dr. Yuna. Izuku had passed a low-voltage test just before her 6th birthday. In order to observe the electrophoresis effect using a sample of his blood, rather than the red blood cells clumping around the path of the current, instead the blood cells jumped around. And well, that was strange in itself. Dr. Yuna felt the same sense of her quirk being suppressed, albeit not as much. When Dr. Yuna noticed this, she put her hand near the blood sample and brought her quirk to life. While she began to hover off of her chair, it was only to a maximum of a centimeter, and she needed to focus really hard to get it. Dr. Ronan and Dr. Yuna got in touch right away, and they started researching this phenomenon. It discovered that Izuku's anti-quirk effects nearly vanished with an additional 10 voltage. Then the blood would start to burn itself out when it returned. The effect persisted for 1 milliliter. Hour before the blood fully burned out and Dr. Yuna was about to use her quirk again. Dr. Ronan summoned Inko and Asahi to describe the circumstances and how this could offer an aid to law enforcement, keeping criminals and their eccentricities under control until they entered a more permanent cell. Hisashi remarked, "But Izuku isn't an infinite source of blood." Yes. I get it. For the time being, we could speak with an engineering firm to create a prototype, and if it's successful, we can provide the local police with a limited supply for a kind of trial run. If it proves to be a practical method, we can begin producing a synthetic replica of Izuku's blood. We project that this synthetic copy will not have as much effect as Izuku's blood. But if we produce enough, then quality won't matter, Dr. Ronan said. That's a big if. What if the synthetic blood doesn't work as well as the prototype? Not working at all? Inquired Inko. After that, the project will be abandoned, and all research will be collected and destroyed, leaving nothing behind. Then, Dr. Ronan paused. I have observed how tempting it is to deceive oneself or others. You take good care of your son, Mrs. Midoriya, Inko. I hope you don't want him hurt or anything of the kind, and despite seeing a lot of patients over the years, I have become close to. Your son's safety has been and will continue to be my top priority among this group. I know that as well. There are many doctors who would rush their work and use it too Make their name known. I'm glad you are not one of those, Inko said. Then she looked up. Looking down the hallway where Izuku was from her husband's phone, which was resting on the table. But it's been the same since the beginning. We want to talk to Izuku, he said while dozing off in his bedroom. About this first. Although he is young, he must understand the purpose of his anti-quirk. He'll probably agree, but we'll speak with him after school tomorrow, and we'll give you another call in the evening. Dr. Ronin said, I understand and thank you again, Midoriyas. Then Hisashi ended the call by reaching forward. He then began running his hand through his hair. It was only the medical field at first, but now it's the field of police officers and superheroes. Inko said softly, I know. But Dr. Ronin and his team are making such progress that much with Izuku's anti-quirk, and this is just another way for Izuku to use his quirk to help others, to assist heroes in defeating evildoers and preventing them from hurting others. I thought we were supposed to be coming up with ways to convince Izuku otherwise. Hisashi chuckled as he spoke, as though to imply that regardless of what Hisashi and Inko might say to Izuku, he would always try to be a hero, even if it was indirectly and by helping other pro-heroes. When Izuku returned home from school the following day, Inko sat him down and went over the Dr. Ronin and Dr. Yuna's findings and their plans for them. Izuku gave a nod. Comprehension. Since he had started reading medical literature during his leisure time, it proceeded slowly as. Although he didn't understand a lot of words, he had improved over the previous 2 years. Comprehension. Izuku was worried even though he was glad he could now assist the police and pro-heroes. The affected person still felt as though a part of them was missing if the cuffs were still in place. According to Inko, it was uncertain because Drs. Ronin and Yuna needed to build a prototype and observe the results of it. Izuku debated for a while before deciding to let the quirk-suppressing cuffs be produced. Dinner was completed when Hisashi got home, and Izuku went to his bedroom. Inko and Dr. Ronin was called by Hisashi. He was informed that Izuku had consented to the handcuffs, but he was terrified of how a person's soul would be affected. The husband and wife received assurances from Dr. Ronin that they would keep an eye out for any similar effects. Additionally, if any consequences occurred, Dr. Ronin and his team would investigate potential ways to lessen the impact. Hisashi then inquired, what company are you working with? At the conclusion of the conversation. To create the cuff prototypes. A company that makes hero support equipment. Yaoya Corp. Dr. Ronin stated. Inko said, thank you, Dr. Ronin. Dr. Ronin said, as always, it is my pleasure, and hung up. After 2 months, classes resumed, and Izuku was now seeing Dr. Ronin every other week, along with his team. Hisashi had taken a day off that weekend to attend the training and tests that his son underwent. Shortly after lunch, the father and son arrived, went to the hospital, and descended into the lower level. Since it was uncommon to have all 4, it was Drs. Ronin and Hizen this time. Physicians show up for the examinations. Dr. Ronin said, good afternoon, Midoriyas. Izuku said, hello, Drs. Ronin and Hizen. It's good to see you in high spirits today, Dr. Hizen said with a slight smile. Midoriya. And since we'll be testing that anti-quirk stasis field today, things will only get better. Your ability creates particles all around you. Dr. Ronin had mentioned that a while back, so Izuku smiled. However, it was decided to postpone testing it until Izuku was a little older and there was greater comprehension of his anti-quirk. We'll have you stand in the middle of the room and hold a blood test for this test. We have the QGC directed at those blood samples, providing us with real-time AP for each meter blood levels of the quirk factor. We've found that you already have this kind of stasis field all around you, but when you're not wearing clothing, it's only a few millimeters thick. You previously stated that you can practically feel the field where someone enters it, said Dr. Ronin. I remember. Izuku recalled the strange sensation he experienced whenever his anti-quirk was using physical contact to repress a quirk. He didn't give it much thought at first, but he then became aware of the pattern. We're hoping that by sensing this stasis field, you'll be able to cause it to grow. Dr. Hizen said as he walked up to Izuku and handed Izuku a small vial of blood. This serves to facilitate that activation. Izuku accepted the blood vial and grasped it in his gloved hand. Then, Dr. Hizen returned and stood beside Hisashi and Dr. Ronin. Dr. Ronan started saying, "All right, Midoriya, on my count, I want you to remove, as you tap buttons on the QGC. Your glove and grasp the blood vial. When you experience that feeling, I want you to make an effort to push it away." Izuku demonstrated his comprehension by nodding. Pointing to Izuku, Dr. Ronan said, "Okay, in 3, 2, 1. After removing the glove from his left hand with his teeth, Izuku switched the vial of blood into it. Izuku felt as though he could sense the millimeters of air surrounding him almost instantly. He seemed to be a tub of water. To better relate to this sensation, Izuku closed his eyes and then he attempted to push. He lifted his right arm and started pushing, but the water resisted, propelling it ahead. Izuku appeared to be miming the act of pushing a very heavy box, the atmosphere. It was a heat mirage, and everything around him started to shimmer a little. Then, Dr. Ronan glanced down and noticed that the QGC's numbers were declining. The first vial's AP number was down by half, the second vial was reduced by A, and the third vial remained unchanged. Dr. Ronan yelled, "You're doing it, Midoriya, push harder." Izuku could hear, but Dr. Ronan sounded as though he was across the hospital. Izuku clenched his teeth and persisted in pushing against the hypothetical box, sensing that the more force the box felt heavier as it was pushed. When Dr. Ronan turned to face that QGC again, the first vial was 3/4 down, while the third vial was down by 8, and the second was down by half. The attention of Dr. Ronan. Izuku exclaimed, and he was dragged away. Dr. Ronan had time to look out and observe. Izuku passes out and hits the floor, following an exclamation that a doctor wouldn't normally make, "Dr. Ronan, Dr. Hizen." Hisashi then hurried to Izuku. Izuku had a strong pulse, but he was not responding. From a young age, Momo Yaoyorozu was aware that she was a proper young girl. Her parents had taught her how to do things correctly, how to hold a utensil correctly, how to appropriately dress and conduct herself around other people. What caused her parents to have her carry out all of this? The reason for this was that they served as the CEO of one of the biggest hero support organizations in Japan. Furthermore, the wealthy in Japan always expected themselves to be more proper. In other words, when a doctor called Momo's parents to discuss they were, to put it mildly, intrigued by the medical device he was developing. However, when the physician showed up, Momo could see in their eyes that they were a few minutes late and somewhat panicked, her parents. By the second, the doctor's reputation was in ruins. Momo's mother said, "Sweeter, why don't you wait outside?" Momo looked at her mom and bowed before making his way to the door and exiting the hallway, prior to the door completely. Momo heard the doctor say, "You'll have to excuse me, one of my patients," as she closed behind her, "requires my attention," and it took longer than anticipated to resolve the issue. Momo didn't hear the rest of the conversation as the door shut, although she was certain. Momo wanted to go exploring, but her parents thought she would just wait outside the door. Because of her peculiarity, it was not surprising that she always enjoyed learning new things, as she could make more things with her quirk the more she understood, as she had been. None of the hospitals I've been to before looked like this. Momo decided to explore the hospital on her own. Momo stuck because she didn't want to get lost. To floor 3, the floor she had been on before. She strolled around while the medical staff and nurses They were too busy to give her much attention. She was mostly able to walk the floor as a result. Free. The only place she couldn't go was behind 2 locked double doors that she saw required unlocking with a keycard. Keycard that was exclusive to nurses and physicians, and as she wasn't a thief, she didn't try to take one. Momo kept searching the floor until she came across a door that was propped open. Momo approached the door and looked inside, where a boy was lying on a hospital bed. He had a tiny, seemingly damp towel on his head and an IV fastened to his arm, covering his eyes and forehead. Just as Momo turned to leave the boy, he moaned as though he were awakening. Momo stopped to observe the boy's gradual movement. It started with his head. He shifted a little, then attempted to raise his arm. He winced because his left arm was the one with the IV inside, but the boy was unable to raise his, so that didn't appear to be the primary problem. Either the right arm. In an attempt to grab the towel, the boy started to quickly toss his head back and forth away from him. He didn't seem to have the energy to do that, though. When Momo saw this, she hurried into the room and went to the bed. she needed to be able to reach up and grasp the wet bed, stand on the metal arms underneath it. Towel. She raised it and withdrew it from the young boy's gaze. Momo brought the towel. She looked directly into the boy's eyes and saw how green his hair and eyes were. Momo said with a positive tone, "Hi." The boy appeared to be about to speak, but when he found his mouth, rather, the phrase, "water," emerged. Momo said, "Excuse me?" The boy said, "Water, please." Momo glanced around and noticed a sink in the room's corner. Taking a step back, Momo went from the bed to the sink and used her peculiarity to make a paper cup. She walked back after filling the cup with water. She offered it to the boy, but as he moved, she grasped his hand, but she could tell he wasn't going to hold on tightly enough. A look of annoyance appeared on the boy's face. Momo said, "Here, let me help." Then she clambered back up on the bed's metal arms and pressed the cup to the boy's lips tenderly. Momo watched as the boy drank the water slowly, kept lifting the cup to keep the water flowing. When Momo lowered the cup after it was empty, the boy said, "Thank you. My name is Midoriya." Izuku. Momo introduced you by saying, "Yaoyorozu, Momo." "Thanks, Yaoyorozu." Izuku said, glancing at the cup. "Was that your peculiarity?" "Pardon me," Momo said, perplexed. "I apologize. I was curious as to whether the cup that magically materialized in your hand was your peculiarities." Izuku clarified that he liked to examine oddities, much like Dr. Ronin and his. He observed a lot of different quirks while his team worked on his anti-quirk was being examined. He ultimately attempted to determine how the peculiarities of the volunteers functioned. "Oh, that's right. That was my peculiarity. I can create any inorganic substance with it. It's called creation material, provided that I am aware of the item's chemical composition," Momo stated. "Made of chemicals?" Izuku queried. "There are 118 distinct elements that make up everything in this world. Every item is distinct because to the way those components come together." Momo then extended her left hand and a few sparks emerged in her open hand, and a moment later, the sparks vanished and a gleaming coin emerged in her hand. Said, "This is precious. Since it's a base element, I can make it with ease." As Izuku examined the gold coin, it seemed as though the sparks emanating from Momo's the quirk had spread to Izuku's eyes. "That is incredible. You can make nearly anything. That would be a fantastic peculiarity for a pro hero." Izuku remarked, "You could assist in all the various situations that arise." "A pro hero?" Momo inquired. "Yeah. Producing items for use in combat or medical supplies for injuries against evildoers," Izuku uttered. Momo hesitated. She had never considered it that way. She had always believed that she was simply. After her parents retired, she studied and got ready to take over the family business. I suppose I never considered it in that manner. You appear to have plans to become a pro hero yourself." Smiling, Izuku said, "Yes. On the battlefield, my power would be extremely helpful, making any villain finds it difficult to prevail. Then it must be a strong peculiarity. What is it used for?" Momo inquired, her curiosity reached its peak. Izuku paused before continuing, "It makes it so other people's quirk doesn't affect me." Momo asked incredulously, tilting her head, "How so?" "Due to a peculiarity, my friend can make explosions with his hands, but his explosion can't hurt me," Izuku uttered. "Whoa. That has a lot of power. No villain would try to slow you down with their quirk," Momo said, then glanced down at the cup she was holding, which caused her to wonder if her peculiarity could impact Izuku. Lifting her left hand, a tiny lead pipe materialized in it. She then gently tapped Izuku's forehead with it. "What was that for?" "Oh," Izuku remarked as he slowly raised and rubbed his right hand. The tiny red patch in the center of his brow. Momo gazed at the tiny lead pipe she was holding and said, "You mentioned that other people's peculiarities don't impact you. However, this was the result of my peculiarity." Izuku gazed at her in confusion, observing her as she produced a second tiny lead pipe, "But it was able to harm you." Izuku was beneath the lead pipes, and his gaze darted from Momo to the pipes and back to Momo. Conviction that he could never be harmed by any quirk. "That's odd. Dr. Ronin, quirks shouldn't be able to harm me," Izuku stated. "Said my anti-quirk destroys any kind of quirk factor that gets close." Her peculiarity, she claimed, made the pipe. "So shouldn't it have a lot of peculiarities?" Consequently, it would have been destroyed prior to. Could hit if, so my stasis field completely stopped it. However, it passed. Does that imply her peculiarity is simply the creation itself? For example, after the item is made, she loses all control of it. If it did, then perhaps she could disassemble the object and absorb the substance again. Would she still be able to make things even if she were immune to my anti-quirk? If I was keeping her oddity in check. Anti-quirk, Momo questions, as that was the only thing she caught from Izuku's. That a strange term, he murmurs. Izuku hesitated, then gradually returned his attention to Momo. I apologize, you weren't supposed to hear that. My anti-quirk isn't meant for people to know. Since Izuku had used that strange term once more, Momo repeated, anti-quirk. Izuku began to stumble over his words and uttered a little cry. He had failed to mention it. Once more, his parents were the only people who were expected to be aware of his anti-quirk. Dr. Ronan's group. Now, however, he had said it more than once in front of a new girl. Momo put the lead pipe down on the table and asked, why do you call it an anti-quirk? Beside the bed was a small table. Izuku sighed before adding, Dr. Ronan came up with the term because of my anti-quirk. Doesn't only prevent me from being harmed by other quirks. I can also suppress someone's quirk by making physical contact with them. Momo asked, suppress. She didn't know what that term meant. Izuku stated, I can stop people from using their quirk. At that thought, Momo cocked her head once more. A person's quirk was an inherent aspect of who they were, as soon as it couldn't be taken away from them. Izuku's assertion was so strange that it was meant to prevent someone from utilizing their peculiarities. There was no way. So you're saying that if I grabbed your arm, I won't be able to use my quirk, Momo replied. Stated. However, before Izuku could respond or even understand Momo's words, she seized his arm and made an attempt to make something. Her hand produced a single sparkle, but that was all. It vanished in an instant. Momo tried to make something while staring at her hand in confusion. It felt as though she was really hungry rather than as though her quirk was meaningless. No, she was experiencing a sensation akin to striking a brick wall. Momo attempted to push back, but the feeling kept getting stronger until Momo unknowingly exhaled. She was in possession. After that, she fainted a little, tripped, and fell off the metal arms from beneath the bed. She struck the ground before toppling over and landing on her butt. A worried-sounding voice called out, Izuku. A man hurried into the room. What did you do? I tried, but I didn't. She simply grabbed my arm before collapsing. It wasn't my intention to do anything. Izuku said. I'm all right. As the man knelt beside her and assisted her, Momo remarked, I just felt faint. Momo got back up and turned to face Izuku, whose hand was numb. Was that your anti-quirk? The man looked up at his son and said abruptly, you told her. No, I didn't intend to. As I was examining her peculiarity, it kind of just surfaced, Izuku said, feeling ashamed. The man sighed and said, are your parents around, miss? As he glanced down at Momo. Momo stated, they're in a meeting with a Dr. Ronan. Then, the man muttered to himself, so that's where you went off to in such a hurry. The man then turned to face Momo and said, how about we return you to your parents? I apologize for the circumstances. May I attend? Izuku inquired. Izuku, you just woke up. Hisashi responded, I'm not sure walking is a good idea for you. Izuku said, I feel better. Hisashi approached his son and pressed the back of his hand to his forehead. Hisashi glanced at his son, who was giving him a hug, and said, your temperature has returned to normal. Fine. His father said, his eyes beseeching. Hisashi summoned a nurse, who performed a brief examination before taking out the IV and Izuku was given permission to leave the bed after covering the puncture with a bandage, and his initial movements were shaky, but he straightened up by the time the group arrived at the door. The father and son followed Momo down the corridors until they reached Dr. Ronan's workplace. That is a ridiculous notion. I now understand that everything you created was done so solely for waste. The duration of both our and other people's company. You may have been deceiving yourself, but your time is ineffective. Additionally, since you declined to provide a thorough report on your design, we cannot provide our assistance. A man's voice, raised and stern, said. When Dr. Ronan's office door was pulled open, a woman and a man in a suit appeared in a dress. The man looked around and said, Momo. He then looked at Momo and said, Come on, let's go. Before we waste any more time, we're heading out. It will be necessary for Dr. Ronan to use a more credulous support firm. Momo, who are these two? The woman asked, turning to face Hisashi and Izuku. Pardon us, ma'am. This is Izuku, my son, and my name is Hisashi Midoriya. We located your. Hisashi stated, my daughter was wandering around the floor and wanted to make sure she returned to her parents. Making sure to distance himself from Momo to demonstrate his non-threatening intent. While her father held her hand, Momo remarked, Dad, Midoriya has a really interesting quirk. You can tell us everything about it, and I'm sure he does, but your parents are quiet after that. Angry at the hospital, Mr. Yaoyorozu remarked. Momo claimed that her parents stopped when she said, he stopped my quirk. Mrs. Yaoyorozu remarked, he stopped your quirk. Mr. Yaoyorozu turned to face Izuku and. What did your son do to my daughter? He asked at Hisashi. As Mr. Yaoyorozu stepped in his direction, Hisashi's eyes widened and he said, wait, it's not what you believe. Abruptly, with some force, the door to Dr. Ronan's office was pulled open. Mr. Although I can put up with you shoving my work in my face, Yaoyorozu, I won't have you do anything to my patients. This patient of yours is accused by my daughter of doing something to her. Peculiarity, Mr. Yaoyorozu remarked, turning to face Dr. Ronan. Dr. Ronan noticed Hisashi and Izuku as he glanced down the corridor. Dr. Ronan concentrated on Izuku. Under the doctor's gaze, the young boy closed up and said, sorry. Mr. Yaoyorozu, you mentioned that I was hiding information, Dr. Ronan sighed. You thought it was because I didn't know, but it was actually to safeguard the safety of one of my patients. Patient privacy, doctor. Additionally, I won't be risking anything with my money if you are unable to share that information. Company. Mr. Yaoyorozu then turned and started to drag himself down the corridor. Momo at her side. Momo remarked, but Midoriya's anti-quirk. According to Mr. Yaoyorozu, in the car. When Dr. Ronan realized Momo had used the word anti-quirk, his eyes widened. He glanced at Hisashi, who appeared equally worried. Hopefully, the Yaoyorozu would accept their Izuku's anti-quirk had just been misheard by the daughter. Dr. Ronan and Hisashi looked at Mrs. Yaoyorozu almost robotically. Mrs. Izuku was approached by Yaoyorozu, who asked him directly, is that your quirk, young one? Izuku shook his head after nodding, saying, I can suppress my quirks because of my anti-quirk. Of other people. Mr. Yaoyorozu froze down the hallway and then slowly turned back to face Izuku. Can you show me? Inquired Mrs. Yaoyorozu. Izuku glanced at his father and Dr. Ronan. They nodded slowly, so Izuku followed suit, saying, first I must be aware of your peculiarity. It's known as assembly. If I'm given something that has been disassembled and I'm familiar with how to build, with a touch it will automatically reconstruct itself, Mrs. Yaoyorozu said. Izuku said, that's so cool. Can it be any size? Like a car? Mrs. Yaoyorozu grinned. She then took out a pen from inside her purse. She quickly deconstructed the pen and then regarded Izuku. I'm going to use my quirk to rebuild. You claim you can stop that from happening, Mrs. Izuku nodded in agreement with Yaoyorozu. Izuku hurried as Mrs. Yaoyorozu extended her empty hand. Removed one of his gloves and placed it gently in Mrs. Yaoyorozu's open hand. Next, Mrs. Yaoyorozu examined the disassembled pen in her other hand. She focused on it and attempted to use her quirk. However, both of her hands became numb, and the emotions began to rise up her arms. That numb feeling, would you be causing that? Replied Mrs. Yaoyorozu. Izuku quickly withdrew his hand and the pen from Mrs. Yaoyorozu and said, sorry. Whirled back together. After circling his finger, Mrs. Yaoyorozu pressed the button on top. Mrs. Yaoyorozu glanced at the pen before the numbness swiftly left her. Mrs. Yaoyorozu looked at her husband and said, it's quite all right, honey. This young boy was successful in stopping me from using my quirk. Mr. Yaoyorozu glanced at Dr. Ronan and his wife, Izuku. At last, he touched down on Dr. Ronan. Maybe you would like to re-present, but this time you could elaborate how this boy contributes to your scheme. Dr. Ronan said, if you would step back into my office. This time, Hisashi, Izuku, and Momo were present when Dr. Ronan presented the space as well. Dr. Ronan described how Izuku's anti-quirk created a negative energy field. suppressing any quirk factor that approached him. Quirk surrounded him, which led to any attack that was halted by a quirk before striking Izuku, who appeared to be surrounded by a force field, and enabling Izuku to use physical contact to suppress the initiate quirk factor. And how it was discovered via experimentation that this peculiar suppressed effect could be accomplished by passing a current through Izuku's blood. How with only a milliliter of Izuku? Although the effect would be lessened in blood, it would still be potent and last for up to an hour. Additionally, Drive Ronin desired to collaborate with Yaoya Corp to develop a set of cuffs that were capable of suppressing quirks. Driven by an artificially created replica of Izuku's blood. Following the illustration of Izuku's blood's impact, Mr. Yaoyorozu was interested in, to put it mildly, a portable and efficient method of reducing a villain's eccentricities that might put Yaoya Corp above all other support organizations, while giving the police much-needed assistance, as the finest. A dangerous villain was unconscious and needed to be transported. Thanking Dr. Ronin and the Midoriyas for their time, Mr. Yaoyorozu stated that he could be in contact with them after he had a functional quirk-dampening cuff prototype. Mr. Then, assuming Hisashi might want to speak, Yaoyorozu gave him his personal number. Outside of the commercial transaction, in the months that followed, Mr. Yaoyorozu personally directed the creation of the cuffs with quirk dampening. In the meantime, Momo and Izuku grew closer and closer, while Izuku lived just one city away, and on the weekends when he wasn't with Dr. Ronin and his group, he spending time with Momo before presenting her to Bakugo. Izuku kept up his training after the initial incident, almost suffering a brain aneurysm. Anti-quirk to force the field of stasis outward around him. He intended to push the capability to 4 meters, with the complete suppression of any quirk that enters that field. As Izuku persisted in train, he started talking to Momo during the week, as following their parents had arranged a video call so they could speak with each other. They primarily discussed the various projects Yaoya Corp was engaged in and the kinds of the anti-quirk training Izuku was undergoing. Then Momo said she was beginning to examine has the same peculiarities as Izuku. Finally, as they discussed the various peculiarities of the new as well as upcoming professional heroes or whatever villain was featured on the news, as Momo was getting. Despite being extremely skilled at it, Izuku was still superior to her. Bakugo eventually discovered Momo by storming into Izuku's rooms and flaunting his latest copy of the SmackDown edition of Pro Hero Ultra. Bakugo discovered Momo and Izuku conversing with. Izuku was immediately ridiculed for having a girlfriend by everyone, as Momo's cheeks turned red. Izuku threw Bakugo to the ground and attempted to get him to repeat his words. Bakugo declined too, but following Izuku's threat to stifle his best friend's eccentricity for a week whenever they were at Bakugo pledged at school that he would never again call Momo his girlfriend in jest. Bakugo and Izuku kept wrestling, but Bakugo had the upper hand because Izuku had short sleeves, so he had to be cautious where he grabbed him, as Izuku was. With his gloved hands, he moved freely. Momo started laughing at the boy's mischievous behavior and became preoccupied. Izuku sufficiently to allow Bakugo to escape and climb over his closest companions. From the kitchen, Inko yelled, "Boys, are you behaving?" Bakugo exclaimed in a naive tone, "Yes, Auntie Inko." Izuku yelled, "Say the person who's sitting on my lungs." He yelled, "Katsuki, get off Izuku." After making a tongue click, Bakugo rolled away from Izuku. Izuku caught his breath and wheezed. Then, he stood up and rested against his bed. Bakugo asked, "So how do you know the rich dame?" "Her family is using my blood to create quirk," Izuku said, his voice becoming stuck in his throat. Dampening cuffs for use by law enforcement, according to Bakugo. "Oh cool." Momo questioned, "Wait, how did you know my family is rich?" Bakugo used the funds from Doctor to access the laptop Hisashi had brought for Izuku. Ronin said, "I can see your closet, and got a lot of fancy expensive dresses in it." Momo noticed her closet door was ajar when she turned her attention from her computer. She had recognized from the beginning that the Midoriyas were not particularly wealthy, despite the financial. They didn't spend money on the compensation they received from Dr. Ronin and Yaoya Corp. Most of it. In order to prevent Izuku from feeling impoverished, Momo chose her closet door as the best backdrop to avoid flaunting her 4 poster beds or endless bookshelves. After saying, "Oh, shit," Momo hurried away and shut the door to her closet. Momo went back to her computer, and Bakugo proposed that they schedule a meeting time in person and go to the neighborhood arcade. Additionally, after Momo said she had never visited an arcade, Bakugo previously recommended that they schedule a time soon. Izuku and Bakugo had no trouble getting their parents' consent, but Momo had to do some persuading to get her father to agree. It was the person who did this was actually her mother, who advised her husband to take a break every occasionally, since Momo had been preparing diligently for the school year's finals. Momo was permitted to visit the arcade by her father. When one school year came to an end and another one started, Mr. Yaoyorozu and the small group he had put together and constructed a working prototype of the peculiar dampening cuffs. The final item was a blood sample from Izuku to check its efficacy. Mr. Yaoyorozu summoned Dr. Ronin and arranged a date of the test. After hearing the positive news, Dr. Ronin was ready to share his own positive news. Izuku's blood was successfully replicated synthetically by his team, and it had comparable effects with electricity and proved to be more successful than anticipated. Dr. Ronin called the Midoriya family after speaking with Mr. Yaoyorozu and said Yaoya Corp wanted to arrange a demonstration with the company's working prototype family. Izuku inquired as to whether he could extend an invitation to the Bakugo family, as Katsuki already was aware of Izuku's anti-quirk, but Masaru and Mitsuki continued to accept Izuku's quirk, preventing him from being harmed by other peculiarities. Katsuki knows. To quote Inko, Izuku acknowledged, "Yes, his best friend, and I felt wrong lying to him." As Hisashi ran his hand through his hair, Inko squeezed her nose. Her son was brought up to be honest, he was very close to Bakugo. Bakugo would have known even if Izuku hadn't told him. Most likely would have discovered it in time. There would eventually have been a circumstance where Bakugo made skin contact with Izuku while using his quirk, but he was unable to do so. "We will have to be honest with them if we bring them to the demonstration, and Mitsuki won't be pleased that you misled her," Hisashi remarked. Inko stated, "I can handle a frustrated Mitsuki. A betrayed Mitsuki, I don't think I could cope with the letdown." After barely escaping with their lives, fleeing from the bond between him, Inko, and Mitsuki had grown stronger than just that of sisters. After that, they agreed to speak with one another if they were having issues. Never tell one another lies. The protest was scheduled for New Year's Eve, an ideal opportunity to consider older decisions and get ready for new chances. 2 weeks prior to Inko's trip to the Bakugo household, and described all that had occurred and would occur, as Masaru was silent and nodded during the discussion, but what worried me was that Mitsuki was identical. Since they first became friends, Mitsuki has consistently been a noisy and bold individual. She has no qualms about voicing her opinions. Thus, Inko anticipated being yelled at. Ed, most likely also cursed out. However, as soon as Inko started speaking honestly about Izuku's anti-quirk, following 2.5 years of work by Dr. Ronin and his team, the creation of peculiar cuff suppression, Mitsuki was silent. She didn't even make a sound or say anything. However, Katsuki joined the group because Inko believed it was what had truly broken her friend dialogue, and added that he was also aware. At last, Mitsuki raised her head from her lap, allowing Inko to observe it in her eyes. The years of understanding gone, the betrayal, the loss of trust, as Inko was someone Mitsuki had never met before. Inko noticed when Masaru started massaging his wife's middle knuckle. She used to do that to help Mitsuki relax following the incident. Then Masaru leaned into Mitsuki's ear, whispering something. Mitsuki returned the whisper. Masaru turned back to Inko after nodding, saying, "Barring. Would you have ever come forward to tell her?" Izuku asks Katsuki. Masaru had not included himself in that question, and Inko was aware of this. It was Inko's now. It's time to gaze at the ground. Had she ever mentioned Izuku's anti-quirk to Mitsuki, let her everyone live the same lie. Regardless of the circumstances, wouldn't Mitsuki have earned that degree of trust? Situation. Inko held a hand over her heart and said, "I apologize, Mitsuki. I should have told you sooner. I regret ever allowing fear to take control of my decision because it had become ingrained in my heart. Hold. I apologize. I wish I had the fortitude you possessed that day. You were always the Stronger one, and I've betrayed your trust, but you saved me that day. Inko sensed that Mitsuki was watching her. With a broken voice, Mitsuki questioned, would you have told me? I don't know. I don't know if I could have, Inko said, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. Conquered that fear. Since Hisashi was the one who told me I had to do this, I'm not sure if I have. He had to drop me off because I couldn't bring myself to come here. Inko looked up as Mitsuki said, but you still walked to the door. That fear isn't. I'm glad you came here because I've missed my little nephew, who is as deeply rooted as you think. Despite her peculiarity, Inko felt a tiny smile come to her lips, offering the most gentle and world's smoothest skin. Mitsuki also possessed the kind of thing that any model would kill for. Thickest skin on the planet. Ordinary things that would make a person tremble with fear, just bounced off her. Inko said, you can see him again at the party. All right, I've been hoping for an opportunity to wear one of my dresses outside of a fashion show. Mitsuki remarked, sometimes a girl has to dress for the fun of it. A sly smile then emerged. Don't think you're getting off it, she said with a smile on her face. Izuku and Hisashi would love new suits as well. Recollection of Mitsuki dressing Inko up so she could see her dress more clearly as she made it came to Inko's attention during fashion college. Inko didn't mind the cosmetics, but some of the dresses were a little tight, and occasionally it clashed with her green hair. However, Inko could tell that Mitsuki would enjoy reliving some of his former glory. After that, their discussion took a more positive turn as Inko and Mitsuki discussed what they had been doing, and Inko said he would bring Izuku and Hisashi over the following Saturday to have a suit fitted, which was in just 2 days. The Midoriyas returned to the Bakugo home for the weekend, and while Hisashi and Masaru conversed in the living room as Inko was measured for a new dress. Katsuki was playing in his room with Izuku. After measuring Inko, it was Hisashi's turn, but Inko chuckled when she witnessed her spouse gulping down a glass of sake because he was certain Mitsuki was taking advantage of the opportunity to question him about anything Inko had not disclosed to her. Hisashi walked out to the car without saying anything, as if something had happened, and left the house without returning. Then Mitsuki entered the family room carrying a. She smiled mischievously as she made her way to the stairs. Mitsuki approached the first door on the left at the top of the stairs and knocked. Izuku, it's your turn. When the door opened and Katsuki moved aside, Izuku was seen using an All Might to play action figure. Mitsuki noticed that her nephew was still wearing the gloves he had on when she looked down at him. Had upon the arrival of the Midoriyas, Mitsuki believed it would help shield the chilly winter air, but why, then, would he continue to wear them? Mitsuki said, Izuku, my dear, it's your turn to be fit for a suit. Izuku placed the All Might figure on the nightstand and said, okay auntie. Mitsuki led Izuku downstairs to an additional guest room that had been changed into something of a studio, using sewing machines and rolls of materials with various devices in the corner. Izuku followed Mitsuki to a tiny platform with 3 mirrors surrounding it. Mitsuki got a measuring tape and told Izuku to get up on the platform. Had a hook left on. After straightening it out by pulling it between her thumb and index finger, she got up behind him. As Mitsuki started to examine Izuku, she had a mental image of a suit. Her eyes darted across the mirror to check the suit's appearance from each angel, but she observed something when Mitsuki's gaze landed on his remaining gloves. He said, Izuku, honey, I'm going to need. Please take off your gloves so I can see your wrists clearly. Izuku remarked, I can't take it off. With a smile, Mitsuki placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder and said, I can adjust the temperature. Mitsuki believed that Izuku had put them on to protect himself from the chilly winter air, and since Masaru, the AC was constantly running to help cool them, and Katsuki had a peculiarity that naturally warmed them up. Take them out. Mitsuki was wearing warmer clothing because of this. Izuku, Mitsuki thought, believed the house to be cold. No, I can't take them off, Izuku said, and Mitsuki reached up to run her fingers through, like she used to do with his hair when he was younger. However, when Mitsuki's fingers touched, her fingers felt as dry as if they were in dire need of lotion as soon as she touched his head. Mitsuki instantly pulled her hands away and felt the softness of her skin return. What the Hela.ek? I forget you can suppress quirks through physical touch, Mitsuki says. Izuku's eyes began to water as she spoke, and she said, oh no, It's okay, dear Auntie. She was a little taken aback, but it wasn't the most peculiar thing she had to do. I forgot, and she's fine. All around. Izuku still had tears in her eyes. All right. How about Auntie M creates a matching pair of gloves for your suit? It will assemble the entire ensemble. Izuku Siad held up his hands and said, okay, but can you make them breathable like these? 2. Point to the gloves he had on already. You can help. That might be difficult, but I enjoy challenges more than anything else. Select the design, Mitsuki remarked. She held one end of the tape measure against. Let the remainder hang against Izuku's arm after placing it on his shoulder. Mitsuki spent the following 30. Izuku was measured for minutes without coming into contact with the skin, to help keep Izuku calm, but she guessed what all those models were because she didn't like how dry her hands felt. Discussing how they described how certain makeup brands left their skin feeling parched after removing it. Mitsuki had all the measurements she required 45 minutes later, however, she wasn't finished yet. As she approached the material sample rows and picked up a couple of the green ones, then she returned and covered Izuku's shoulders with a few samples. Mitsuki examined the various samples, removing each one individually because she didn't like how the colors contrasted with Izuku's dark green hair color. Mitsuki picked for 5 more minutes before deciding on a color and ordering Izuku to leave the platform, as she attached the piece of paper with the measurements she had written to the green sample. Substance. Although I no longer make gloves in-house, I can still place the order with the business we get. Costume orders from, Mitsuki remarked, asking Izuku to take a seat at a table while she took measurements. Izuku's hands, followed by obtaining a picture of them. Mitsuki started assembling the dress's base and 2 suits after the Midoriya family departed. In her capacity as CEO, Mitsuki hadn't personally issued an order in a long time. Have a lot of contact with the costumes, aside from assisting them in selecting designs, she was glad to return to her roots. Mitsuki, who was on paid time off, was going to concentrate on getting the dresses and suits ready too. A few days prior to New Year's Eve, after inviting Midoriyas to try them on, Mitsuki discovered that they fit exactly. The various families and medical professionals dressed up for New Year's Eve and went to celebrate the new year with the people of Yaoyorozu. The mansion belonged to my Yaoyorozu. After preparing a 3-course meal for the celebration, staff members make alcohol for the adults, bubbly without alcohol for the children. Everyone was getting ready to move into the spacious living room as dinner was coming to an end. For chatter and games until the countdown started, Mr. Yaoyorozu got up from his seat and held up a glass. Mr. Yaoyorozu cleared the room after making a gentle tapping sound with his fork against the glass. His throat and explained that their purpose was not just to welcome the new year, but also to consider the achievements of the past. That everything has been completed, but Dr. Ronin and his group have made progress. With everyone present to support him, Izuku had made his anti-quirk, and now it was time for Yaoya Corp to enter the fray. Then Mr. Yaoyorozu raised a briefcase from beneath the table. He manipulated the dials on it before pushing the button. He extracted a pair of sunglasses from the briefcase. They weren't the typical cuffs, which were 2 metal rings joined by a thin chain. Rather, they seemed to be one single piece, as though the cuff had been carved from a metal object. The cuffs could fold into themselves, as Mr. Yaoyorozu showed, making them more transportable. After that, the cuff twisted back and forth and could only be opened by an electronic fab, making their selection challenging. The cuff was then turned around by Mr. Yaoyorozu, exposing a vial of red that everyone could see among the cuff's black and gray metal. Acknowledged as the blood of Izuku. The science underlying how an electrical current causes Izuku's his blood will activate his anti-quirk. Next, Mr. Yaoyorozu showed how to use a scan of the fab, and the vial of blood could be readily ejected with a button press as he took a fresh vial out of the briefcase and put it in the handcuffs. According to Mr. Yaoyorozu, this was a feature that made it simple to replace the vial of Izuku's blood in the event that the effect wore off before the bad guy was in a cell. No one offered to demonstrate when Mr. Yaoyorozu asked because they had previously witnessed Izuku repressing their eccentricities. Then Masaru got to his feet. He had been the only one who had never before had his quirk repressed. Masaru approached Mr. Yaoyorozu, who inquired, "Before we begin, if you could explain your quirk to everyone." I can create explosions by creating friction between my hands and other objects. Masaru said as he slammed his hands together, causing a tiny explosion to occur. After thanking Masaru for the demonstration, Mr. Yaoyorozu removed the handcuffs in. Masaru's wrist was fastened with them. The cuffs then hummed softly when a concealed button was pressed. And the red vial started to light up. Masaru felt a chill run up his spine and his hands started to feel chilly. Masaru said, "Oh, my hands are cold." Dr. Ronin assured them, "Don't worry, that's an expected side effect. Now Mr. Bakugo, if you don't mind, try to use your quirk once again," Mr. Yaoyorozu stated, reaching for the briefcase and extending it to Masaru. Although a little awkward, Masaru was able to hit the briefcase with the palm of his right hand. However, nothing occurred, so Masaru struck his hand once more, and the chill from his hands began to seep into his spirit. The others were reluctant to try the cuffs, and he began to see why. As Mr. Yaoyorozu unfastened the handcuffs, Masaru uttered, "I can't use my quirk." Hisashi lifted his cups and said, "So it's a success then," as everyone at the table started to give a clap. "We are prepared to deliver 1,000 of these peculiar damping cuffs to the Musutafu police in 2 days. Before we start producing theses in large quantities, we will conduct a trial run and artificial Izuku blood to be sent to precincts throughout Japan, but these..." As he twirled the handcuffs and threw out the blood vial, Yaoyorozu spoke. Mr. Yaoyorozu approached Izuku at the table and said, "Belong to you. You made this possible, you should be rewarded for your efforts." Izuku took the quirk dampening cuffs and nodded after taking a look at them. Mr. Yaoyorozu said, "Come, let us celebrate this wonderful holiday." Late in the afternoon on New Year's Day, Detective Tsukachi remained in his office, suffering from a minor hangover after his younger sister persuaded him to accompany her to a bar. When he got to the bar and realized his sister had already had a drink, he immediately regretted his choice. A few pictures. Detective Tsukachi made the decision to organize throughout the day as a result. This office, referring to the various files he possessed for various inquiries. Tsukachi, a detective, felt his headache returning and reached across his desk for the pain medication bottle, but his hand unintentionally toppled a pile of papers, using a sigh, and after taking additional painkillers, he circled his desk and began to seize the stack of documents. He saw the Yaoya Corp logo in the upper corner of a paper as he started to get to his feet. Detective Tsukachi, wondering how he had overlooked that earlier, took out the paper and noticed that it was the station captain's paper that Detective Tsukachi had initially believed to have been a station party invitation or something. However, as Detective Tsukachi settled into his chair and perused the document, he discovered that the notice for the upcoming station party was anything but. It was a Yaoya Corp memo asserting they had created a unique dampening cuff that was effective, a creation that many heroes reliable support companies had been attempted but failed. However, it appeared that Yaoya Corp was assured and intended to conduct a test at the Musuagu station, where these devices were initially installed. Run. Detective Tsukachi took out his phone and dialed after rereading the paper. The number of a professional hero he had previously collaborated with. There were 3 rings, and Detective Tsukachi assumed the call would go to voicemail, but instead a weary, "What do you want?" the voice asked. Detective Tsukachi inquired, "Eraserhead, how familiar are you with Yaoya Corp? One of Japan's largest manufacturers of hero support gear. Why? Is one of the executives who are suspected?" Eraserhead inquired, clearly displaying his "I just woke up. No, it seemed they've been trying their hand at quirk dampening cuffs, and it seems as though they have faith in their design," Detective Tsukachi remarked. Eraserhead responded, "Sure. And I'm sure they'll fail like all the other attempts. Yaoya Corp is a selective company that has a reputation for delivering, so I'm not sure they're confident enough to go to a public trail run," Detective Tsukachi said. Eraserhead questioned, "What makes you say that?" "I'm looking at a memo from my captain that invites all of the Musutafu officers too. Many local pro heroes are attending a demonstration tomorrow. Because of your peculiarity, I assumed you. According to Detective Tsukachi, I would like to hear about it. That's a confident public trail run, and you're correct that Yaoya Corp isn't the kind to go public unless they are certain that their gadget is dependable and functional," Eraserhead said, then fell silent for the moment. "What time is the demonstration?" According to Detective Tsukwachi, tomorrow at 1 p.m. It was Eraserhead who said, "I'll be there tomorrow." Shota Aizawa arrived at the Musutafu police station the following day wearing regular civilian attire, consisting of black pants and a black shirt. He approached the reception area and the officer pointed out his hero license and led him to the station's main lobby. When I walked into Aizawa, I noticed that the lobby was nearly full of local professionals and on-duty officers. Heroes. As Aizawa approached the coffee maker, he discovered Detective Tsukwachi standing there. Buy it. So where's Mr. Yaoyorozu? Aizawa asked as he poured himself a cup. Detective Tsukwachi stated, in the captain's office. He'll be presenting from the stairs. He took a sip of his coffee. Aizawa asked, have you seen them? No. Mr. Yaoyorozu had a briefcase cuffed to the famous quirk dampening cuffs. I bet my next paycheck that they're in there, Detective Tsukwachi remarked, referring to his wrist. As he drank the cold coffee, Aizawa remarked, well, it's stirred up a large crowd. The quirk dampening cuffs are the holy grail of Yaoya Corp, a big company. Any uncertainty in this room will undoubtedly be eliminated by the time Mr. Yaoyorozu completes his demonstration. Tsukwachi, detective. Aizawa stated, we'll see about that. After concluding the conversation, the station's captain descended the stairs and gave a clap. To attract everyone's interest, he spoke briefly about Yaoya Corp's presentation and what it might signify for Japan's police. Mr. Yaoyorozu took a step back, then stepped forwards and spoke about the value of the police and the presence of Yaoya Corp. To alleviate their load. Halfway through, Mr. Yaoyorozu continued by outlining the science underlying the cuffs. Leaning toward Aizawa, Detective Tsukwachi declared, he's lying. Aizawa asked, the cuffs don't work. They function by sending an electrical current, but the science is incorrect. Detective Tsukwachi stated, he's lying about what's in the vial, but he's lying through it. Probably because it's a business secret, which prevents other businesses from capitalize on their success and hard work, Aizawa remarked. Detective Tsukwachi asked, but why lie to the police and pro-heroes? Mr. Yaoyorozu, pardon the interruption, but you'll have to forgive our skepticism. Aizawa identified the local pro-hero as Comet Tail. There have been additional businesses that have attempted to make quirk dampening cuffs, but many haven't even noticed a trace of achievement. Indeed, you're requesting that we depend on these, but data indicates that they'll lead to more problems than. What are they worth? A policeman yelled. A reasonable assumption, but what if someone volunteered to show that my Mr. Yaoyorozu then gestured to Comet Tail and said, I think you were the first company to invent. To express your worries. Comet Tail approached the stairs with a sly smile and moved up to stand beside Mr. Yaoyorozu. He had a clear view of the QDC, and they didn't appear to be very impressive. Why don't you tell everyone your quirk, so they know what they won't be seeing, Mr. Yaoyorozu said. It's called Comet, and it enables me to travel quickly while creating a trail that. Comet Tail remarked, looks like a comet tail. Mr. Yaoyorozu then surveyed the station and said, a speedster, good for a demonstration. Officer, if you don't mind tossing me one of those empty mugs, he said, pointing to an officer. Mr. Yaoyorozu nodded as the officer pointed to himself. The policeman seized one of the. He grabbed mugs from the desk he was standing on and hurled them at Mr. Yaoyorozu. He caught it and looked at it. It's over. Comet Tail joked, what? Are you going to throw that at me? As he placed the cuffs on Comet Tail's wrists, Mr. Yaoyorozu responded, no, then he took a step. Held the mug over the railing as he walked over to the edge of the stairs, saying, I'm going to drop it and you're not being able to catch it. With a laugh, Comet Tail said, easy. So, how about offering a reward to demonstrate that you're not opting out of using your quirk? After saying, you catch the mug, I'll give you 10,000 yen, Mr. Yaoyorozu produced a tiny fab. That featured the button, ready. Mr. Yaoyorozu pressed it, and the red vial started to glow. Go. Comet Tail turned to the stairs and began to run after Mr. Yaoyorozu dropped the mug. He attempted to use his quirks, but to no avail. This surprise caused Comet Tail to miss the. He slipped on his first step, fell down the stairs, and hit the ground with his face. Arrived Tail. He let out a groan as soon as he heard the mug smash against the floor. The fab in Comet was held by Mr. Yaoyorozu, who immediately regained everyone's attention. Tail direction and press the button. A person's quirk can be suppressed for an hour with a single vial, and 1,000 pairs of these cuffs will be delivered to this precinct, and the vials are easily interchangeable. Tomorrow, and a Yaoya Corp representative will be present to provide additional operational demonstrations. The handcuffs. Following that, Mr. Yaoyorozu turned and headed back up the stairs. The following day, Musutafu. A number of wooden crates were delivered to the precinct, each containing 20 pairs of handcuffs and 40 red vials. The public quickly became aware of the peculiar damping cuffs after that. After the villains were vanquished, police officers were dispatched with them in hand and using them, and gave them to them. However, the most significant story was when a professional hero was spotted utilizing them to halt a antagonist prior to their escape from a robbery. The professional athlete received a private reprimand because he was not allowed to the QDCs as of yet. The officers were more than pleased to respond to inquiries regarding the handcuffs and provide the media to their creators, Yaoya Corp. Yaoya Corp then became the focus of attention. Police stations throughout Japan were submitting, while new media outlets were asking for interviews. Requests for dampening cuffs with the new quirk. Mr. Yaoyorozu spent the following month conducting interviews and boosting output of QDCs in order for each Japanese precinct to have 1,000 QDCs by the start of the summer. As a trio of friends, Izuku, Bakugo, and Momo grew closer over the ensuing years, and even though, despite attending different schools, Momo always spent the weekends together. They were 12 at the time, and it was summer. Having shown Momo the neighborhood arcade, she fell in love with them right away. For her, they were the ideal means of escape from the. Her parents wanted her to lead a high society lifestyle. Momo wanted to go one Saturday to the arcade, so after meeting her at the train station, Izuku and Bakugo went to the nearby arcade. None of them paid attention to the man in the dark hoodie who was following them as they went. Bringing his phone to his lips, the man declared, "I have eyes on her." The voice asked, "Are you sure?" She can attempt to cover herself up with an old sweatshirt, but her face is too obvious to conceal. The man remarked, "She's hanging out with those two boys from the local middle school. We were given those quirk dampens because they might be a problem. Once we have 3 middle schoolers are powerless to stop their eccentricities once we have the girl. When their parents hear our demands, they will have to destroy that chemical formula in exchange for their daughter. After that, we simply need to wait for the police to provide the necessary materials." The voice said, "Where are they headed?" "Run out." The man said, "The local arcade. The others will be waiting, so wait until they're finished and get them on their way out." The call ended after the voice said, "For your signal." After entering the arcade, the man made his way to the bar that was attached to the side of the amusement park. He watched intently as the three of them played various songs for the hour and a half. Games, prior to obtaining their prizes at the ticket booth. Evidently, they had received some jackpot just as they were going to receive some of the more expensive awards. The man wearing the black hoodie picked up his phone as the three of them left the arcade and turned it on and off 3 times in a hurry. A group of men walking down the street in an unmarked. A white van started down the street after pulling out of an alleyway. When the van passed, a side door was abruptly opened, and 2 men applied their peculiarities. The initial one seized hold of, while the second man pushed up the cement. Bakugo's cloth pulled him into the van. Izuku was launched into the van from beneath him. Momo was grabbed by the man wearing the black hoodie, who then leapt into the van. Bakugo began to swear, and a tiny explosion began to form in his hand, but the cuffs were clenched around his wrist. The explosion stopped instantly, and Bakugo's hands became cold. A feeling he only ever experienced when he suppressed his quirk. Bakugo noticed that peculiarity when he looked down. They had been dampening cuffs. When Bakugo was flung into the van's rear, he noticed Izuku and Momo were also given quirk dampening cuffs by the group of men. Then, they were both flung to the rear as well. Bakugo shouted, "How do you have these?" Yaoya Corp monitored each pair of QDC they created, and each one needed to be signed in and out at the police stations when shifts changed. Thus, how did some, and 3, end up in the hands of a bunch of thugs? The man in the black said, "That's something you'll never have the pleasure of learning." After saying that, Hoodie took a pistol from the back of his belt and pointed it at Momo. "However, since your father made these handcuffs, they have only caused problems for my friends. If your father wants you and your friends to go back, then this is how it will work. He'll securely erase all information about the chemical composition that powers those handcuffs. The three were somewhat relieved that people still think the cuffs were operated by a chemical formula, or rather, anti-quirk, rather than by a quirk. If your father doesn't meet our demand, then he'll never see his daughter ever again. According to the man, remember that. A dart struck Momo in the throat after the man in the black hoodie pulled the trigger. Bakugo threw himself forward, but he was struck in the neck and said, "You son of a bia." Fainted. "You going to act up?" the man asked, drawing a pistol at Izuku. Izuku merely grinned. The man once claimed that the trio was being pursued due to their peculiarity. Dampening cuffs, Izuku believed he was to blame. However, it was evident that they didn't know who had within their reach, or else he would have been the intended victim. Even if Mr. Yaoyorozu destroyed everything, all he would have to do was obtain a new copy of Izuku's blood and all the data. Izuku's blood sample to begin the procedure anew. If you knew who you were referring to, you would have noticed this plan would never have worked, so I believe I'd prefer to take the bullet, Izuku uttered before experiencing a. He felt a tiny prick on his neck before dozing off. Neither could Mr. Yaoyorozu recall his daughter returning home yesterday. Recollect any arrangements for her to stay at the Bakugo or Midoriya homes. Catching Mr. Yaoyorozu called Inko on his phone and said, "Good afternoon," when she answered. "Mrs. Midoriya. Maybe I'm not remembering, but were there any plans for our kids and the wild children?" "Oh, I was going to give you a call with the same query. As of right now, Izuku and Katsuki." Inko said, "I'm on my way to the train station to meet your daughter." "That's odd. Momo would have informed me of the change even if it was made at the last minute." "Of plans," Mr. Yaoyorozu uttered, but was cut off when one of the family's butlers entered the space. "I apologize for interrupting you, sir, but I have something that was given to me by a very shady." "It was for your eyes only," the butler said, referring to the party. "What is it?" asked Mr. Yaoyorozu. As he opened the envelope and poured, the butler remarked, "A flash driver, simple in nature." "He said you would want to see this," he said, pulling out a flash driver. Yaoyorozu gave the flash driver a look. No coincidence could explain why an unmarked. Around the same time he realized his daughter was there, a flash driver from an unidentified third party arrived. Was absent. Mr. Yaoyorozu put his phone on mute and said, "Inko, I'm going to have to put you on hold." Swiping the flash driver, he said, "Leave." After bowing slightly, the butler left. Mr. Yaoyorozu gave the flash drive a thumb. Prior to connecting the USB port to his home computer, after choosing the pop-up, he noticed the file on the flash drive. He took note of the time and date the video was placed on the flash driver. The time was 6:48 yesterday. Mr. Yaoyorozu inhaled deeply since he knew what the video files contained. Momo, wearing an old hoodie with tape covering her mouth and eyes, clicked on it and started to walk. Showed up with 4 men standing behind her, their faces hidden. They described the circumstances of how they were holding Momo hostage after kidnapping her, but in exchange, not for cash. For Mr. Yaoyorozu burning ally supplies and erasing all information on the formula used in the QDC. The police had been contacted by Yaoya Corp. The group would release their daughter in return. Additionally, if Mr. Yaoyorozu considering showing the police the video, they might be able to murder the other 2 hostages, Izuku and Bakugo were drawn into the frame with tape covering their eyes. Izuku had tape covering his mouth as well. Bakugo, however, wore a muzzle. Bakugo's savage nature appeared to have persisted. Mr. Yaoyorozu was incredulous. He added Mistuki to the call after unmuting his phone. "We need to talk." Detective Tsukwachi looked up from the laptop as the video came to an end, then he looked to. Both of them were wearing civilian clothes when Eraserhead asked, "So what did you see?" According to Aizawa, "First they're idiots." Mr. Yaoyorozu remarked, "They have my daughter and they know how to play the game." "What makes you think they're idiots?" "They possess 3 of your QDCs, so unless an officer or one of your staff handed them over, they broke in, took them, and they knew who your daughter was because of the clothes she was wearing. They were following her because she wasn't wearing her usual clothes, so this wasn't an opportunity, rather, it was planned. Additionally, the kidnapping occurred so swiftly that no one had a chance to report it. Opportunity to observe, Aizawa remarked. "Sorry, but that sounds like those are the moves of idiots," said Mitsuki. "Maybe, but it wasn't what they did." This was a hurried video that could have been shot more. Usually, your children's clothes aren't too dirty 2 hours after they were abducted. They would put off filming for a few days, allowing the parents to worry about the circumstance. So this group was impatient, and their emotions influenced their decisions after seeing the video. Took the video right away and forwarded it to you. Having Izuku was their only wise choice. And Katsuki as extra hostages, although that could have been accomplished by the head of the group, explained Aizawa. That implies that they probably have someone pursuing you, and that person will probably tell the leader about our meeting, and if we're lucky, they'll note that it was a family gathering rather than. None of this matters, Mr. Yaoyorozu. You cannot ruin that formula with the police. More villains have been prevented from escaping thanks to your unique dampening cuffs than All Might. According to Detective Tsukachi, and I'm wagering that if you make a backup, the ongoing product will. Simply because this group will not simply kidnap your daughter if they pursue her again. According to Mr. Yaoyorozu, I don't care. You can't destroy your sons and daughter, but I'm sure we can find another way to save them. The formula. Tsukachi, the detective. Before time runs out, we must save Katsuki Bakugo and my daughter Izuku Midoriya. Out, said Mr. Yaoyorozu. Sir, why did you list Izuku Midoriya first? Aizawa asked after pausing. Mr. Yaoyorozu stopped and looked at Inko. With a sigh, Inko observes, very few. The key to the quirk dampening cuffs is my son, and people are aware of what I'm about to reveal. Quirk can suppress other quirks in addition to preventing them from affecting him by physical contact. Just like Eraser. Tsukachi, the detective. Eraser simply stops the quirk factor from being activated, Inko said, startling her head. Heteromorphic quirks lose their mutant gene, and Izuku's anti-quirk completely eliminates the quirk factor. It dawned on Aizawa that Izuku's anti-quirk was so potent that, not even I can do that. As you can see, these villains have a formula, and Izuku has a more intricate genetic code. The machine that uses the QDC to create the synthetic copy is more advanced than anyone else on the planet. Cannot precisely replicate the sequence, and after 6 months, the sequence it can retain starts to degrade. Down, so Izuku must enter and have a small amount of his blood drawn by the machine. The most recent blood draw was 5.5 months ago. That machine will start producing synthetic materials in less than 2 weeks. Blood that is ineffective, Inko remarked. With their attention now on Izuku, Detective Tsukachi and Aizawa rewatched the video. It appeared that these thugs were unaware of their identity as hostages. Izuku, Momo, and Bakugo were chained to different walls in a room with cement walls. The doors were on the 4th wall, and there was a swing door at the bottom where meals had been pushed through. If their first meal of the day was dinner, then they had counted 9 meals. It was the 3rd full day since the kidnapping. On 5 different occasions during that period, a different group member arrived and led Momo into a different room. Izuku and Bakugo realized what was happening after the initial since Momo had come back with tears in her eyes and bruises. Therefore, they attempted to block whoever entered the room to prevent them. However, they would activate their peculiar dampening cuffs and retraction to the wall would be the result. Momo always had fresh wounds and bruises when she came back across her body. When Bakugo and Izuku attempted to console her, the chain securing their handcuffs to they were only able to sit next to Momo because of the wall. Additionally, the fact that she had fallen silent on the 2nd day's morning. Izuku had been attempting to devise an escape strategy ever since. With Momo's invention and Bakugo explosion, escape might be simple, but Yaoya Corp had prevented removes the cuffs using the key, and they couldn't have escaped without their peculiarities. The small door on the bottom of the door swung, breaking the quiet of the room. 3 sets of meals were pushed through the opening. They all cast grim glances at Bakugo. Replied, that makes 10. End of day 3. Bakugo stood up and moved toward the trays, while Izuku remained seated beside Momo. Before returning for the 3rd, he picked up 2 and carried them to Momo and Izuku. Looking down at the little meal, Momo muttered, why haven't they found us yet? It was created specifically for them. Izuku wanted to touch her back with his hand, but the chains on his QDCs stopped him from doing so. Don't worry, our parents will figure out a way to get us. Those bad guys believe that these handcuffs are powered by a chemical formula. Your father will make a fake formula and let them destroy it, but I'll be all he needs. Shut the F-432 up about that, If they hear, Bakugo said, tossing Izuku a small piece of bread. Then they may discover it. Izuku felt the beard hit his cheek and rubbed it, saying, sorry. Then he turned around. If we don't have our own escape plan, they'll find us, Momo said. We just need to figure out how to. Come on, you need to eat and we need to maintain our strength, so get out of these cuffs. Izuku placed half of his food on Momo's tray. Slipping back from her tray, Momo remarked, no, stop. You also need your strength. Momo had been receiving half of his meals from Izuku, who said that as soon as they were able to get away, her quirk was going to be necessary. However, Izuku's plan never materialized because the largest obstacle. The quirk dampening cuffs were being removed. As soon as they exited the room, they would have no chance against the group if they simply activated the keys. Izuku got up and walked back to his wall, saying, not as much as you do, so Momo was unable to return the food. Izuku finished his dinner and went to bed, while he kept trying and figure out how to escape the handcuffs, but before he realized it, he was lacking in energy. Under hitting, Izuku dozed off. Clairvoyance worked for Endeavor's agency as a sidekick, which was challenging for many people. Think that the second-ranked pro hero in Japan was notorious for exclusively employing sidekicks with firebase peculiarities. However, Clairvoyance and her partner, Flying Fox, were in a unique position to secure employment. They had worked for an old pro hero who had been killed in a villain attack, the sidekick. That overthrew a jerk, but neither of them had the strength or popularity to attack independently. When Endeavor's organization assumed control of a rescue mission as a tsunami struck a Japanese coastal city, the large man himself observed how effectively they collaborated and how they planned to find the victims as soon as possible. Endeavor provided them with the decision to work for him since he visits Japan more frequently and their assistance could reach more individuals. Since the agency they left went but, they were pleased to accept the offer. A little under 3 months later. Additionally, Detective Tsukachi and Eraserhead had called the two recently. A unique task for the two of them, to fly over Musutafu City and attempt to find 3 students in middle school. They had been flying over Musutafu for the last few minutes and arrived as quickly as they could. 2.5 days. Clairvoyance could inform her that it was becoming late in the evening. An hour ago, partner's speed began to decline, indicating that she was beginning to feel fatigued. Clairvoyance was beginning to get a headache, so she couldn't really blame her. Come, Keita, let's take a final walk before turning in for the evening. We'll have. Clairvoyance told her partner, I hope those kids can make it through another night. As she started to turn around and make another passover, Flying Fox said, okay, Naira. Musutafu. Clairvoyance made a circle with her index and middle fingers and lifted her left hand to her eye. Thumb. When the building turned translucent, Clairvoyance started searching for middle schoolers who matched the images of Momo Yaoyorozu, Katsuki Bakugo, and Izuku Midoriya. However, as Clairvoyance kept scanning, but she couldn't find any middle schoolers who resembled the 3. Just as Clairvoyance thought her day was coming to an end, she noticed something that attracted her attention. 3 human-like black figures that appeared to be shadows had arrived to existence. Clairvoyance directed Flying Fox to land on a nearby rooftop after focusing on them. Clairvoyance held her left hand up to her eye as she stood on the roof. Taking her phone out, she called Detective Tsukachi. Detective Tsukachi pleaded, Clairvoyance, please tell me that you have good news. I apologize, but I have a question. Izuku Midoriya's quirk is null, so there isn't any other. Can his quirk affect him? Inquired Clairvoyance. Yes. And that works for all quirks. Yes. Okay. So my quirk, so what effect does null have on reconnaissance quirks like mine? What? Asked Clairvoyance. For a moment, Detective Tsukachi was silent, only broken by the sound of metal drawings. Both open and closed. All right. I have the medical file from Dr. Ronan, came the sound of rushing paper. It seems that a Dr. Heisen was the one who tested the first reconnaissance-type quirk on Midoriya. His quirk gave him the ability to see how Kai flows through a person's body, but those pictures were altered by Midoriya. Never showed up. Why didn't other people's claims that their quirk worked on Midoriya? Because, when you haven't played a video game, I'm staring at 3 living shadows. Clairvoyance remarked, unlocked something, all grayed out. That does sound like something Null would do. What's your address, detective? Sukachi inquired. They passed along their address via Flying Fox. Detective Sukachi stated, other side of the city from where they were kidnapped. Clairvoyante, how detailed are these shadows? Clairvoyance put her phone on the roof and said, give me 1 second, she then brought up. Appeared to be holding a pair of binoculars in her right hand, saying, all right, the first one is. The second one is tall and has an average build and height, with what appears to be a spiky afro in their hair. Height but is slender, with long hair pulled back in a ponytail. Detective Sukachi said, that sounds like Bakugo and Yaoyorozu. Clairvoyance remarked, third shadow, I can't get any detail. Detective Sukachi stated, that must be null, it would be condensed around Midoriya. Thanks Clairvoyance. Detective Sukachi said as he sprang out of his chair and picked up a radio. Said, pay attention, this is Detective, after hanging up the phone and pressing a button on his radio. Sukachi. We located them. No lights or sirens, all patrol officers report to 4X of 4X. Establish a perimeter around the block and notify any local heroes. Sir, is that really necessary for a group of thugs that kidnapped 3 kids? A policeman inquired. Would you prefer to return, or is one of those children the daughter of Yaoya Corp's CEO? Detective Sukachi stated, to the ways things were before the QDCs. They were given names and patrol numbers by officers, who then reported to go to the area to establish a perimeter. Detective Sukachi clipped his radio to his belt and pulled up after hearing this. Sent him the address along with Eraserhead's number. Nothing else, no context, but Detective Sukachi was aware that he would most likely be among the first professional heroes to arrive. Sir, I have good news, Detective Sukachi said to Mr. Yaoyorozu, Clairvoyance. I'm having the police and pro-heroes set up a perimeter, and Flying Fox followed them. Keep in mind your role. Assign the fictitious formula and close the deal while you and a small group of officers and professionals. Heroes sneak into their hiding place. If they need a distraction, offer to let them burn it, Mr. Yaoyorozu remarked as he hung up and dialed the number shown in the video. A distorted voice said, it seems you have come to a decision. After inhaling deeply, Mr. Yaoyorozu said in his most dejected tone, yes, the police have previously worked without my formula, so they'll need to do it once more. I've focused all of my search on the flash drive you gave me, and I'm prepared to give you all of the physical data. Come see me at. I'll be at the bakery off of 12th and Pino in half an hour. After directing his driver to the bakery he had just mentioned, Mr. Yaoyorozu slipped into his car. The bad guys. Mr. Yaoyorozu was sitting at an outdoor table 20 minutes later, and he had offered a coffee and a scone for himself. A man with a scar across his left side appeared shortly after the food was delivered. The seat across from him was informed by his eyes and a burn on the right side of his neck. Mr. Yaoyorozu. The man acknowledged him. Mr. Yaoyorozu said calmly, and how shall I address you? Nail said, you can call me Nail. All right, Nail. You're obviously a representative, but your boss is undoubtedly keeping a careful eye on you. By ensuring that our transaction proceeds without a hitch, Mr. Yaoyorozu remarked while sipping his coffee. Nail remarked, you keep on believing that. So the deal. I give you all the QDC data and research, and you can destroy it. It and return my daughter Momo Yaoyorozu along with her pals Katsuki and Izuku Midoriya. Mr. Yaoyorozu said, Bakugo, and placed the briefcase on the table. They're nearby. Once we have the information, we'll release them, but you'll still need to locate Nail Siad. Nail remained composed even though Mr. Yaoyorozu wanted nothing more than to reach up and punch him. As Nail took and opened the briefcase, he pushed it across the table, saying, it's a pleasure doing business with you. Nail shut the briefcase and got to his feet. He started to leave, but Mr. Yaoyorozu interrupted him by asking, won't you check to make sure I'm telling the truth? I could have ever. I copied everything exactly. One of our voices tells us that you are overly attached to your daughter. To risk it, Nail remarked. Mr. Yaoyorozu reached into his innermost thoughts and asked, then aren't you going to burn it? Took out an antique lighter from the pocket of his jacket. You must have misinterpreted our intentions because we didn't want to ruin your formula. We intend to use it ourselves, and a chemist with a knack for formulas will duplicate the serum, after which we will sell it to the underground, making it much more difficult for professional heroes to stop us. When they discover they are abruptly unable to utilize their peculiarities, Nail remarked. Mr. Yaoyorozu spoke again as Nail started to leave. The signal had not reached him. That the trio had been located, then maybe you want to know something. A little final piece of information I omitted. As you can see, we in my line of work always keep a secret near our hearts. Chest. Although that briefcase contains the only copy of my research, you'll discover very challenging to duplicate my recipe because I omitted a crucial component. Mr. Yaoyorozu used a napkin to wipe his mouth, leaving a half-eaten scone and hardly. But you're more than welcome to walk, she said, touching the coffee on the table before leaving. Away. Your friend who works as a chemist may be able to identify the essential component, but it will require some time. You may not have any time because I will be searching for every professional hero I personally know. You and your pals. As he approached Mr. Yaoyorozu and drew his gun, Nail yelled. This scene led to all. What's the ingredient, or your daughter won't, caused one of the customers to leap away and hit the ground. Be approaching a complete family. Activating his quirk, Mr. Yaoyorozu turned away and grinned, saying, it's simple. Allowing him to retrace his steps by 5 strides, he was able to teleport behind Nail as a result. Blood, whisper. Mr. Yaoyorozu punches Nail in the back before he can respond. When Nail collapsed to the floor, Mr. Yaoyorozu leapt on him after flipping him to the ground. Mr. Yaoyorozu kept punching Nail in the face. The significance of the minute vanished when Mr. Yaoyorozu's knuckles turned red from blood and repeated application. Police had to pull Mr. Yaoyorozu off of Nail because he was unable to stop himself. Officers. Mr. Yaoyorozu gasped for air as the world returned to focus. Tell me you have them. Detective Tsukwachi, Ares, said one of the officers, pressing his radio. You wish to inform Mr. Yaoyorozu of your findings. Mr. Yaoyorozu, it seems your daughter and her friends have some fighting spirit. Tsukwachi, the detective, said. When Mr. Yaoyorozu realized they had been located, he broke down. They would be all right. Following Detective Tsukwachi's indication that Mr. Yaoyorozu had initiated the deal, he entered the alleyway with a group of 4 professional heroes led by Eraserhead from which Nails had emerged. Nails' footsteps were followed by one of the professional heroes to an open door. Taking the initiative, Eraserhead guided the small group to an open space that appeared deserted. One of the pro heroes said, this doesn't lead anywhere. Actually, unless Nail can teleport, his footsteps suddenly disappear right here. As he began tapping around, the tracking pro hero said, until one of my footsteps sounded hollow. The others huddled together and started looking for a latch. Eraserhead pulled out as his finger wrapped around a metal hook. Like a spell, an outline of the ground emerged, and the cement slab was removed to reveal a ladder-equipped hole. Eraserhead said, come on, we don't know how much time we have, before leaping off the ladder and slid downward. Eraserhead heard his voice as he reached the bottom of the ladder. Descending the ladder with other raid members, a voice called out, hey. Eraserhead held onto his scarf, which served as a capture tool, before turning around. Threw it at the gangster behind him. Eraserhead turned to see the thug being dragged. Catching the thug by the scarf, Eraserhead leapt to his feet and kneed him in the temple. The criminal was coerced into the wall during the assault, where Eraserhead kicked him again after uppercutting him up against his temple. The thug fell to the ground, letting out a low moan. The remaining professional heroes and Detective Tsukwachi saw the thugs unconscious after descending the ladder, saying, let's hope the rest of this group will be equally simple. Yeah, maybe then this will go down in history as the easiest raid ever. One of the supporters heroes spoke. Then Eraserhead raised a finger to his mouth. Everyone could hear the sound of flesh hitting flesh. The kids, in their ears. Regardless of whether the others were pursuing him, Eraserhead took off. The next criminal. Eraserhead had the regrettable experience of witnessing what was important to everyone in his way back when Eraserhead was saving a young person. The thug was jumped at by Eraserhead, who planted. He pressed both knees to the thug's chest. Eraserhead made his descent as the thug fell backwards on his chest after landing with him. Eraserhead pressed his fist against the thug's chest as the thug screamed in agony. Nose. The thug's nose was broken, and the back of his head struck the ground as well, causing him to faint. Eraserhead didn't freeze when another thug rounded a corner. Rolling forward, the underground pro hero hurled his capture tool at the thug. Eraserhead ripped the weapon from the thug's hand and wrapped it around his rifle, as Eraserhead stood up, whirled around, and struck the thug in the jaw with his fist. Eraserhead heard the jaw of the thug. He Spartan kicked the thug's guts after nearly dislocating, and when the thugs collapsed, Eraserhead completely dislocated the thug's jaw by placing his elbow across it. As she apprehended a criminal, one of the professional heroes exclaimed, "Damn Eraserhead, leave some for us." Who attempted to attack Eraserhead covertly. After knocking the thug unconscious, the pro hero dropped him to the floor. Eraserhead remarked, "Count doesn't matter, saving those kids is all that does." "Come on." Clairvoyance said they were in the south end of the building. Investigator Tsukwachi said as he hurried down the corridor. Since it was evident that none of these were the case, the professional heroes divided up to search the underground bunker. Thugs were engaged in combat. Some of them had annoying peculiarities, but nothing that led to a level of difficulty. Detective Tsukwachi and Eraserhead remained together and served as the primary leaders of. For the bunker's south side, as they turned a corner, someone shouted, "Don't you dare! You bastard, touch her!" Then a heavy object struck the floor. Eraserhead remarked, "That sounded like Midoriya." While preparing his pistol, Detective Tsukwachi remarked, "And that attack sounded heavy." Eraserhead kept his scarf in his hand. They approached a door that was slightly ajar and heard Izuku's shout came from it. Detective Tsukwachi and Eraserhead hurried in without wasting any more time. Anticipating Izuku's to be beaten by one of the thugs, however, Izuku was perched atop an ancient gentleman. He was beating his fist into the man's face while shouting. Then Eraserhead shouted, "Midoriya." Detective Tsukwachi shouted, "Izuku," even more loudly. When Izuku's fist reached its peak, it paused. He turned slowly to gaze at the two of them, his pupils pinprick. He was going to kill her, as blood trickled from his knuckles. Izuku looked quickly at Momo. As Eraserhead examined Momo, he noticed that she had her shoulder was heavily cut. As Detective Tsukwachi hurried over to administer first aid, Eraserhead Izuku was approached slowly. Detective Tsukwachi said, "It's okay, you're safe. You're all safe." Izuku had been rudely awakened minutes earlier by the door being pushed open all the way because they had been tossed in first. "Come the boss," said a man with a pistol and a mask as he entered. "Wants to see you during the conversation." "See," Izuku groaned. "I told you your father would play the game." "Yes, but neither he nor you are aware of the type of game he is playing. Come on." The man motioned with his pistol. "Get up." The man approached Bakugo and unlocked the chains after the three of them got to their feet. Out of the handcuffs, Bakugo attacked the man right away, but before he could detonate an explosion, Bakugo's hand only produced a tiny puff of smoke as the QDC turned on. Bakugo fell backwards after the man slapped him across the jaw while laughing. As he approached, the man said, "Remember, little one, there is always someone watching." Momo and opened her up. Izuku was then unlocked and told, "Come on, boss man wants you." Bakugo got up and followed the man out of the room with Momo and Izuku. Space. He guided them to a room where an elderly man was seated at a table with. It has multiple monitors. The monitors displayed various camera angles of the dialogue between both Nails and Mr. Yaoyorozu. "It's fantastic that you've finally chosen to introduce me to your friends," the older man said, gesturing for the other man to leave. "Perhaps you would like to tell your friends about me." Momo said quietly, "This is Amon Jin, former head-out security for Yaoya Corp." Voice. "Yes, I did hold that position for almost 50 years. Would you like to know why I am no longer in that position?" "How long is the security head?" Jin inquired. Bakugo sneered, "Because you retired." Jin hurried forward and slapped Bakugo across the face, seemingly unaffected by his advanced age. Jin's arm changed into a katana and he said, "Next time I'll use my quirk." "No, I am the former head, but I was fired by this bitch's father. My wife had a rare illness that even I was given the option to spend time with my wife in her final months because quirks couldn't heal or work and let her die alone. However, when her father fired me, he made that decision. Without a job I could not cover the medical bills to ease my wife's pains, so now I'm giving her father the same choice. I believe that I would be stuck waiting for Yaoya Corp to develop its Magnum operations indefinitely, but one. I've heard of these quirks suppressing cuffs, which is something no other company has done. Additionally, they Worked, and I was aware that I had the final piece. I give him an option today so he can safeguard the formula. He can save his daughter, or he can power those handcuffs you're wearing. Jin returned her attention to the screen and observed Mr. Yaoyorozu transferring the briefcase. Oh. It's heartwarming to see that your father values you more than his company. However, the father is unsure of who he is interacting with. I now have his biggest ace after he handed it to me. His formula and his daughter. I'll make the serum with it and resell it underground. Take this and destroy it. Society, which will be difficult for superheroes to stop when they are unable to use their special abilities. Mr. Yaoyorozu abruptly started to leave, but Nail then produced a gun. Suddenly, Yaoyorozu attacked Nail after teleporting behind him. Jin exclaimed, "Oh." With a startled tone, "I thought your father was a family man, but it appears his work is more important to him than his family." However, that ought to have been evident when Jin turned to face Momo after he fired me, and his right hand dropped, changing into a katana. However, now that we know who he loves and that he has regained his valuable formula, he won't give a damn about what I do to you. Jin charged forward and drove his blade all the way into Momo's shoulder. Momo screamed and sagged forward, but this only made Jin's blade cut deeper. "Cease. Release her." As he attempted to move but his body froze, Izuku said. The blood was slowly slipping from the tip of Jin's blade and out of Momo's wound. "Why?" Jin glanced at Izuku and remarked, "It's obvious she means nothing to that man. However, she holds significance for us. She is a friend of ours," Bakugo shouted. "In this conversation, you two are meaningless." "Collateral damage," Jin remarked, turning to face the rear. At Momo, but as her father beat, Momo was staring at the monitors rather than Jin. Did her father genuinely care more about his job than he did about her? The light in Momo's eyes had been fading for the past day when Izuku looked at her, but Izuku felt his fists clenching, but he couldn't let his friends lose hope because it seemed to be almost out. Even those who had been turned against him attempted to break free from the quirk-dampening cuffs. Izuku's range was restricted, but he could sense that his anti-quirk was not being suppressed. Still attached to the wall by chains, now that he was free of the wall chains, he needed to assist one of his friends. Izuku's mind was unable to think as he attempted to extend his stasis field around himself in order to save Momo. However, his physical exhaustion made that impossible, but he needs to divert Jin's attention. Mother said, "You're wrong." Izuku had to acknowledge that it was his own voice, so he paused before continuing. Declared, "Your plan does not include us as collateral damage. You believe you're very intelligent, engaging in these mental games with Mr. Yaoyorozu, but you're so dim-witted that you're unable to recognize what's directly before you. You assume that he will simply take care of the formula, the key to these handcuffs operation. Since there is no formula, he can't since he has figured out the secret. It's just me. I can physically suppress other quirks with my quirk, but a stasis field produced by running an electrical current through my blood literally destroys a quirk factor of the individual. That's what's in these red vials, and that's what powers these cuffs. You see, Mr. The secret was broken by me, not by Yaoyorozu, who isn't attempting to preserve his company. He always tries to save his daughter, so you must stop harming her or your scheme will fail. Never function." A tiny heat mirage formed around Izuku's hand as he spoke, making them somewhat hazy. Pulling his blade out of his pocket, Jin remarked, "That's a bold claim, but no such quirk existed." Momo kicked her back and grabbed her shoulder. Izuku got up and said, "You're right." In the center of the QDC, the red vial began to shine brighter. The vial's artificial blood was responding to Izuku's anti-quirk. "This is no quirk. This is my anti-quirk." The rest of the cuffs fell apart as the red vial exploded. Izuku yelled and lunged. As Izuku approached Jin, the hand instantly changed back. Jin was knocked down by Izuku. Landed and struck him in the face. Izuku heard sounds coming from the door that was open, but he didn't concern as he kept striking Jin's head. The heat mirage surrounding Izuku's hand pulsed over Jin's body with every blow to his fist. Jin's hands would change into a blade and then violently return to their original form. With Jin's blade grew shorter with each transformation, and the gleaming metal began to resemble skin. Until Izuku gave Jin a final punch, at which point Detective Sukwash shouted, "Izuku!" Izuku slowly pulled his fist away from Jin's face, causing the blood to trickle over and fall to the earth. Izuku turned slowly to face Detective Tsukwachi, saying, he was intending to murder Yaoyorozu. Rushing to Momo, Eraserhead examined the wound on her shoulder. It was what hit her? Narrow and had red all the way through. Bakugo growled, that F432 Kur's quirk. His hands turned into blades. When Eraserhead turned to face Bakugo, he saw that he was fine, in order to clean Eraserhead. After wrapping Momo's wound, he looked down to see the QDC on Momo and Bakugo's wrist. Then he turned to face Izuku, who was indeed wearing handcuffs. The Eraserhead noticed a shattered metal object and said, Detective Tsukwachi. While Izuku had his head buried in the ground, Detective Tsukwachi scanned Eraserhead. Detective chest. Is that what I think it is? Asked Eraserhead, nodding toward the jumble of shattered metal. Let's get these kids topside. Their parents are concerned about that. We'll deal with that later. Detective Tsukwachi said, them. Bakugo shook his head and said, hey, Hobo and Trench, how about getting these F432 Kurs off? My hands are F432 King Cold, he said, gesturing to the quirk dampening cuffs that were on him. At this moment, when Eraserhead and Detective Tsukwachi examined Bakugo's wrist cuffs, they noticed that the red vial was strobe light flashing. Detective Tsukwachi inquired, Eraserhead, how's Yaoyorozu? The blade penetrated completely without cutting any significant arteries. It appears he wanted. I've wrapped her shoulder, but she will need to go to the hospital as she slowly bleeds out. And receive sutures, Eraserhead uttered. Placing a hand on Izuku's head, Detective Tsukwachi stated, Midoriya, I must look for. That guy has the remote control to let your pals go. Izuku seemed to be saying that he didn't want Detective Tsukwachi to let him go by shaking his head. Midoriya. Izuku said, no, tears began streaming down his face. Bakugo said, I'll search the F432 Kur. He got up and approached Jin. It was. Bakugo tore them open because he couldn't fit his hand into another Jin's pocket. A black remote dropped out of Jin's jacket pocket. Bakugo recognized it and seized it. And pressed the button. 5 seconds later, Momo's wrist cuffs and Bakugo's cuffs clicked. Bakugo tore the cuffs off Momo's wrist as Eraserhead tugged them off, then he held them in a single hand. Bakugo threw the handcuffs like a ball and added an explosion with a shout. The handcuffs flew through the air, and they started to become embedded in the wall when they struck it. Bakugo sneered while he then detonated the remote control, saying, how dare that bastard use the nerd anti-quirk like that. Eraserhead took hold of Bakugo's shoulder before he could become physically violent. Come on, we need to get topside, she said, looking directly into the blonde bomber's eyes. We'll let the police deal with him. The role of a professional hero is to thwart a villain, and then you must turn them over to the police. Eraserhead then walked over to Momo and picked her up, directing Bakugo away from Jin. Up. Izuku stood up after Detective Tsukwachi persuaded him to do so, and they left the room together, although as they proceeded down the corridor, Detective Tsukwachi and the other 3 professional heroes appeared. This is Detective Tsukwachi. We're Code 4, he said, grabbing his radio. I repeat, Yaoyorozu, Bakugo. We are Code 4, and Midoriya has been saved. Detective Tsukwachi, Ares. You want to tell Mr. Yaoyorozu what you found? An individual said. From the radio inquired. Examining Momo, who was unconscious in Eraserhead's arms, Detective Tsukwachi said, Mr. It looks like your daughter and her friends are resilient, Yaoyorozu. A hero with a levitation quirk emerged as the group arrived at the ladder and carried Momo up. After being hurried to an ambulance, she was brought to Musutafu General for urgent surgery in order to better clean and suture her wounds. Bakugo and Izuku rode together in an ambulance while Eraserhead kept an eye on 2 EMTs to ensure the boys did not sustain any severe wounds. While Momo was being operated on at the hospital, Izuku and Bakugo were placed in recovery rooms, followed shortly by the arrival of their parents. The room in Midoriya was flooded by Mitsuki and Masaru gave their son a silent hug while Inko and Izuku wept. By evening, Momo had recovered from the procedure, and the physician clarified that while Momo would survive and the procedure didn't cause any major issues, she would have a unpleasant scar, and she would probably need to undergo physical therapy. Additionally, she would occasionally experience shoulder pain, but rest and a hot towel should help those swiftly vanish. The parents went home after hearing the news, but Detective and Eraserhead stayed behind. Prior to leaving, Tsukwachi stopped by the hospital, after seeing how Momo was doing, and they proceeded to Izuku's room. Bakugo and Detective Tsukwachi knocked. Midoriya, this is Eraserhead and Detective Tsukwachi. We met earlier today, and we wanted to discuss something. Could we please enter? Izuku yelled, yes. Detective Tsukwachi turned the knob, pushed the door open, and he and Eraserhead entered. Izuku was seated on the hospital bed, resting something that appeared to be a journal. With a pencil in his hand, in his lap. As he dropped his pencil in his journal, Izuku asked, what did you want to talk about? And shut it. Detective Tsukwachi stated, it's Amon Jin. Specifically about his quirk, Katana. Retrieved a chair and took a seat at the foot of the bed, as Jin was being placed. He slipped out of his quirk-dampening cuffs and attacked the officers before entering a holding cell. Accompanying him, Izuku recoiled and remained somewhat silent, so Detective Tsukwachi went on, it's okay, Jin was swiftly resolved, and neither officer suffered any injuries, which attracted attention because Jin was free to use his quirk, but when asked, Jin stated that he was unable to do so even after. He said he attempted to use his quirk, but it felt like he had struck a brick wall as he escaped the cuffs. He continued by saying that you had harmed him in some way. He remembered a sensation. You hit him, overwashing his body. When he attempted to use his quirk, the feeling returned. Thus, the station performed a test and took a sample of blood. Even after running it several times, a peculiarity was invisible in Jin's blood, giving the impression that he had no peculiarities. Izuku glanced at Detective Tsukwachi, remembering how irrational his feelings had been. His only concern at the moment was preventing Jin from ever hurting him, so he ran as he attacked Jin. Anyone with his peculiarity. Jin specifically called you out, and we know how good you really are. Your parents decided that. To be honest with us in order for us to comprehend the seriousness of the situation. Detective Tsukwachi. However, your file only contains your anti-quirk, which enables you to stifle someone else's quirk by either by creating a stasis field around you or by physical contact. However, once you let go, a person's peculiarity. Eraserhead glanced at Izuku and remarked, so maybe you can explain why Jin's quirk hasn't. Izuku took a deep breath and said, I don't know. I lost it when Jin hurt Yaoyorozu. I felt as though my anti-quirk was growing stronger, and I was unable to think clearly. I remember I lunged at Jin after the cuffs broke. My only thought as I knocked him to the ground was stopping him, keeping him from harming Momo any more with his quirk. It didn't feel as if I were the one making the fist motion. My anti-quirk seemed to be doing so, snapping at Jin. Wishing to repress his eccentricity. Your anti-quirk was then pushed to its limit, possibly as a result of your intense emotions. It suppressed Jin's peculiarity, and perhaps it kept pushing it farther and farther. Detective. After asking, Tsukwachi noticed Izuku's terrified expression and said, don't worry about it, Midoriya. It was a stressful circumstance, and you lacked self-control. There is no trouble for you, and nobody will discover that you were involved in Jin's quirk's unexplained disappearance. Everybody has worked hard to conceal your abilities, and we will follow suit. Izuku's journal fell open as he nodded and shifted his legs around. Eraserhead saw a thorough illustration of present Mike along with some details regarding the professional heroes. Peculiarities. Are you a present Mike fan? Izuku said. Huh? And Eraserhead gestured toward Izuku's journal. Izuku glanced downward and noticed that his journal was open. Oh, I guess you weren't meant to see that. I listened to every time a new episode of his podcast is released. However, because I enjoy pro heroes in general, I discovered all of their peculiarities in general. They're really awesome. For example, Eraserhead asked, who's your favorite? Eraserhead grinned beneath his scarf as Izuku said, All Might. The response should. But all pro heroes are cools. Izuku then turned to face Eraserhead and said, You're a. I've never seen you on the news before, but you're a pro hero, right? Eraserhead, who works more during the day, is referred to as an underground pro hero. Detective Tsukwachi observed the light in Izuku's eyes and said, the night and stays away from the media. Gaze, do you want to become a pro hero, Midoriya? Yes, I've always aspired to be a superhero because I believe that there can never be a villain because of my anti-quirk. Not there to harm me, and I could stop them by just grabbing them, though that would be difficult. For them to continue fighting without their peculiarities, Izuku remarked. Glancing down at Izuku, Eraserhead saw that the child was exactly like him. As I grew older, Aizawa knew he could level the playing field even without a combat quirk by using his opponent's peculiarities, which are their greatest strength. Izuku's file stated that although he was unable to remove mutant quirks, didn't experience that problem. One of the greatest heroes, Eraserhead, taught at UA High School. Worldwide schools. However, he had witnessed it several times. First-year students arrive with a strong quirk without any preparation or training. All they had to do was think to survive their eccentricities. Eraserhead remarked, then you must have some training. However, Izuku's shoulders fell. Not encouraging. Well, not really. Kachan and I occasionally hike in the city's outer forest, and Izuku stated, my parents don't agree with me signing up for martial arts, even though we wrestle a lot. Since you're 12 years old and will be graduating from middle school in a few years, you should make plans too. Eraserhead said, I am. I want to go to where All Might went to high school, Izuku replied. The entrance exam is reportedly the most difficult of all the hero high school exams, according to many. Have entered with nothing but their peculiarities and failed. This occurs annually, but if you're astute, Eraserhead remarked, you'll have some training and some luck under your belt. Eraserhead caught Detective Tsukwachi's attention. Due to his hectic schedule, the pro hero was testing at UA during the day, followed by partying at night. Tsukwachi, the detective, was unsure how. When Eraserhead asked if he ever slept, the pro heroes replied that he remained up all night. Coffee and resentment. Was the professional athlete attempting to offer Izuku and his friends training? When you're released, go to this address if you want to become a pro hero. Eraserhead said, maybe just what you're looking for, and he produced a card and gave it to Izuku. Izuku took the card out of curiosity and noticed that it was entirely black. It didn't seem like there anything on it, but when Izuku turned the card just a little, the matte black that was written on the card. It was an address. Izuku saw Eraserhead when he turned the card over. The small, matte black writing is agency writing. Izuku closed his journal after slipping the card inside and said, thank you. Detective Tsukwachi said, thanks for answering our questions, Midoriya. He stood up. Before departing Detective, he and Eraserhead bowed to Izuku before making their way to the door. Midoriya, I want you to do something for me, Tsukwachi said as he turned around. Izuku replied, yeah sure. Don't worry about it. Although the police and Yaoya Corp may have used the QDCs, are going to look into how Jin managed to contact them, so don't believe that your friends couldn't have defended themselves with their quirks. Your anti-quirk has been a assistance to law enforcement and professional heroes. It prevents many negative circumstances from getting worse. When Momo awoke 4 days after arriving at the hospital, she was met by a her shoulder ached sharply. Her entire arm hurt at even the slightest moment. A nurse entered the room a short while later and assisted her. Momo's shoulder was described by the nurse. Her muscles and veins had been torn, and she had been punctured. She was saved by the doctors, and it only took her waking up following a blood transfusion. A doctor was then summoned by the nurse, and he provided a more thorough explanation of the circumstances and discussed how Momo would have to undergo physical therapy and learn how to manage her pain episodes. Shoulder would occasionally encounter. Momo tried her best to give her parents a hug when they arrived an hour later. Her entire body shuddered as she gave her parents a hug, and the only sound she heard was their sobbing. A few minutes later, in a feeble voice, Mom, Dad, of the tearful reunion. As Mrs. Yaoyorozu put it, yes honey. Momo's voice said, I know what I want to do with my quirk. I want to be a pro hero. Gaining some support for her pro hero statement, Mr. Yaoyorozu started, Momo, we talked about this, the world of pro heroes. I understand that it's risky for someone like me, but I was in that room the entire time. Midoriya remained optimistic, describing how the professional heroes would track us down and how you would be right there with them. Izuku would try his hardest even if Jin tortured me. Soothe me, to give me the willpower to continue fighting. It wasn't his power or his. I want to do that for him because of his heart and his belief in the pro heroes. Others. I don't have to be the hero who saves the day or vanquishes the bad guys, but I would like to be the superhero who is there to console the helpless person who is caught in the middle of everything. A firm yet kind hand that reassures them that everything will be fine and that they are strong enough. That they think it's true. They exchanged glances as Momo buried her face in her parents' shoulder. There. Despite her recent extremely traumatic experience, they knew their daughter was resilient. Sufficient. Strong enough to overcome it, accomplish what many found difficult, and use it to strengthen herself. She now desired to assist others by sharing her own experience, becoming a. Since not everyone could be as strong as her, she provided a helping hand and guidance. Mr. Yaoyorozu kissed his daughter's head and said, okay, if that is. You already know the fundamentals of Bukujutsu, so we'll do what you want to do correctly. Please select 3 weapons that you feel comfortable using. 2 close-quarters weapons and a long-range weapon. Range weapon. You will be trained to become so proficient with those weapons that no one can defeat you. Will be ready to make contact with anyone. After that, you'll be traveling to Ua. Eraserhead is a teacher back then, and I'm confident he'll keep an eye on you as you develop your abilities and learn new ones. We will become one that history will never forget if you continue to strive to be a pro hero. The 3 were discharged from the hospital the following weekend, and Izuku was able to persuade Bakugo should accompany Eraserhead to the address on the card he had been given. However, Izuku declined to inform Bakugo of their destination or the reason behind it. When they eventually arrived at the address, they discovered it to be a dilapidated old building. Izuku started to search for a door, but Bakugo caught hold of his shoulder and, "What the hell are we doing here, Izuku? We just got out of one," he said, forcing his friend to look at him. "Terrible circumstance, and I don't want to find myself in another one." Izuku took the card out of his pocket and said, "It's okay, Kachan." Eraserhead had given him, in the hospital. Eraserhead and Detective Tsukachi spoke with me and we were offered training by Eraserhead. After taking the card, Bakugo was about to say that Izuku dubbed when he noticed the matte black writing. "Since I'm not into his underground stealth, did he offer to train us or just you?" Izuku kissed Bakugo and said, "Nah, I'm sure you found something useful." Said, "Come on," I saw the door, and left. Bakugo glanced back at his friends after glancing down at the card, wondering what the worst that might occur. Bakugo trailed Izuku into the dilapidated warehouse. Within, the floor was covered in dirt, with patches of grass emerging from cement fissures. The fact that not a single piece of training gear was visible was concerning. Overall, it appeared to a dilapidated warehouse that had been left unoccupied for many years. "You were misled, Izuku. Eraserhead is an underground pro hero who doesn't have time to instruct us. Additionally, if he was sincere, why would he include his agency's address in a dilapidated warehouse?" Bakugo remarked. "Oh, I'm sorry, were you expecting freshly waxed floors and padded equipment?" The warehouse reverberated with Eraserhead's voice. Abruptly, something encircled Bakugo was hauled into the air by his legs. Bakugo roared, "What the hell?" as he came to a halt. Erased, then lowered gradually. Using the same capture scarf that he used to drag Bakugo into the air, he pulled himself to the ground. "You claimed that stealth isn't a useful skill to learn, but if you've studied," Eraserhead remarked, "then you'll be able to tell when someone is sneaking up on you." Bakugo fell to the ground as the scarf around his ankle came loose. "And you'll train here. Because you won't be fighting on paved roads or a waxed floor when it comes down to it. You will encounter an atmosphere of chaos and destruction, so if you don't think you can tolerate getting a little filthy and grass stains, then you might want to spend your time looking for a new career." Bakugo stood up and brushed some dirt from his spiky hair, saying, "Yeah, whatever." Eraserhead remarked, "Good, because this isn't the only place you'll be training," and started to approach a sizable garage-style door. Bakugo and Izuku were told to follow him. When he got to the garage door, he yanked on a cord and pushed the big door up. There was a fantastic view of a nearby Musutafu beach on the opposite side of the garage door, or it would have been if there weren't mountains of trash on the beach. "You'll be conditioning here, and your schedule is as follows until you get into Ua. You will come here every Friday after school to clean up this beach, wherever it may be. I advise you to begin, but this beach will be clean by the time you attempt the entrance exam. With the lighter things, but anything isn't deemed clean until it enters one of those big. There are trash cans in the former parking lot. You can choose to work your way inside or outwards. After that, You will train with me here every Saturday, regardless of your peculiarity. You will both learn how to fight close quarters and without quirks, Bakugo. Your choice whether you leave or stay. Together, Izuku and Bakugo exchanged glances before declaring, "We'll be staying." "I'm glad to hear that. What day is it, please?" Eraserhead spoke. Izuku replied, Friday sir. And what do you have planned for Friday?" Eraserhead inquired. "Oshi 321 inches" was the blonde bomber's exclamation after Izuku and Bakugo exchanged glances. Then, hopping the chain link fence, Izuku and Bakugo hurried down to the beach. That had toppled over. "You can find a box of gloves, but I suggest building calluses on your hands." Eraserhead was careful to note that Izuku and Bakugo were still children, even though it seemed like he was harsh with his students. And he was certain that since they cut them, their parents wouldn't want them to return home sick. Touching corroded metal, Bakugo and Izuku cleaned the beach until the sun went down, and it was. After walking them home for dinner, Eraserhead left for his patrol until 2 o'clock. When the sun rose in the morning, he went home and then got up to go to the storage facility. Izuku and Bakugo were already at the warehouse when Eraserhead arrived. Eraserhead practiced their stances during their initial sessions, learning how to hold their grounds regardless of Eraserhead's attack angle. Izuku and Bakugo cleaned the beach every Friday after that weekend and then worked out with Eraserhead on Saturday, although they made steady progress on the beach. It appeared that Eraserhead had no predetermined plan for their Saturday practice sessions, but they weren't training alone. Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu fulfilled their pledge to assist in turning Momo into an expert battle that was untouchable. Shortly after leaving the hospital, Momo had decided on her weapons for her close. She selected a bow staff and batons as her range weapons because they were very intimate and personal. She could easily use it to get some breathing room despite the close quarters, but for her extended range weapons, she decided on a small bow because it was easy to make and Momo didn't. She didn't really need to worry about running out of arrows because within a year of Momo was learning to shoot a bow with deadly accuracy. And as all of this was happening, a lot of things changed, including present Mike and. After school let out on Friday, Midnight noticed that Eraserhead had vanished and discovered no. They first questioned him in the teacher's lounge after seeing him on Saturday. Whenever he arrived for coffee, he would either say what he did for a living or refuse to respond. They had no business dealing with personal matters. However, personal space was the one thing that neither present Mike nor Midnight completely understood. Present Mike and Midnight make the decision to snoop around on their own one Friday. Present Mike and Midnight promptly dismissed their student in the race out when the last bell rang. Of the room. Their students asked if they had any important plans for the weekend because they were moving so quickly. Which was to introduce Mike and Midnight. They hurried to the instructor's locker room and put on regular civilian clothes after taking off their hero costumes, and Midnight covered her hair. While present Mike pulled up the hood of a flannel hoodie, Midnight wore a brown wig. Put on jeans with holes in them, present Mike slipped into sandals, and Midnight wore low-topped shoes over the knees as present Mike slipped on a pair of bleach-stained jeans. Then, in an attempt to reach Midnight's car before anyone else did, they hurried off of UA campus. Observed them, but Principal Nezu yelled, "Yamada, Kayama. I'm willing to admit that I nearly thought you were intruders, convincing me that our security system had not done enough to keep our students safe. I must now inquire as to where the two of you could be going in such terrible attire that, I must say, lacks your sense of style." However, Principal Nezu questioned before Yamada or Kayama could respond, "Is it perhaps to get a response to the query you've been asking your coworker Aizawa over and over? If so, I'll give a heading. Since your friend vanished, the local beach appears to be changing. There might be answers there. Oh, please share what you discover. I detest getting sand in my fur." Yamada and Kayama took that as approval to carry on with their snoopy. Kayama's vehicle and left UA after Principal News had pointed them in the direction of the nearby. They went to the beach. The two unidentified professional heroes parked down the street. Despite Aizawa being one of the greatest underground heroes, they waited for any sign of their friends. Yamada and Kayama had known him since they were both at UA, so he was a master of stealth. They could predict his approach to the beach. However, as they watched these routes, neither of them saw their friends. However, Yamada did. He tapped Kayama's shoulder and indicated the two young boys who were coming toward the beach. Boys. What are those two up to, in your opinion? Yamada inquired. I don't know, but with all that trash on the shore it can't be safe to play around it. Kayama said. How likely do you think it is that those two will arrive here on the same day? Does Aizawa vanish here for the same reason? Yamada inquired. You mean Mr. Grumpy, who is constantly exhausted and seeking a reason to dismiss his pupils? You believe that man is training in the little time he has left over? As they exited her vehicle, Kayama inquired, at 2 middle schools. It would help to explain his extreme secrecy. He is known for being the instructor who doesn't go away. However, he harbors a secret affection for 2 children, Yamada jokingly said. Kayama remarked, well, either way, we should make sure those kids don't get hurt. Started walking toward the beach while Yamada accompanied her, following the sand's footsteps. The 2 boys pushing a broken washing machine were discovered by the 2 disguised professional heroes. Through the sand. When Kayama and Yamada attempted to conceal themselves, the blonde one stopped. He lifted his head to catch his breath, met Kayama's gaze, and said, Hey Izuku? What? The boy with the green hair, now known as Izuku, got up and turned to face Kayama. Along with Yamada, oh hi. While Kayama grinned and strode forward with assurance, Yamada said, Hi. So what? What specifically do you intend to do with this outdated machine? Izuku stated, as though it weren't the most evident thing in the garage, pushing it up the garage bins. The world. Kayama questioned, and what has led you to be doing such a thing? Izuku began, training. However, Bakugo interrupted him midway by striking his side with his elbows. Well, training. Would it be supervised by a sullen man who always had the appearance of he needs a cup of coffee badly, Kayama inquired. Izuku's eyes darted behind them as he said, well, I don't put it that way. However, Izuku wrapped Yamada and Kayama in a gray scarf before he could alert the 2. And Bakugo identified as Eraserhead's instruments of capture. Then, the professional heroes there soared into the sky and managed from a post on a power line. I didn't think Kayama and Yamada would be foolish enough to attempt something like this, but then the rat put me on your trail. Eraserhead said, walking around a trash pile. Tightening his scarf. What? Principal Nezu gave us away, but I thought we were being his spies, Kayama stated. Yeah, he said he was curious about where you went every weekend as well, Yamada replied. Stated. In an attempt to remove the scar, Kayama and Yamada moved, but that only led to Yamada's hair falling out from behind his hood and Kayama's wig falling off. Izuku said excitedly, wait, Midnight and present Mike. Eraserhead, Midnight, and present Mike freeze at that, saying, wait, you recognize us out of the costume? The child has an eye for detail, so what can I say? If you give him enough time, he probably would have identified you despite your disguise, Eraserhead remarked. Midnight's voice was giddy as she said, so it is true you were training them. She found it hard to believe. Eraserhead had a place for the 2 children because he was actually training middle schoolers. So what convinced you to train them? Blackmail, distance relative, what? Present Mike. Present Mike and Midnight struck their heads as Eraserhead snorted and jerked his scarf. In agreement, they said, they've got more potential than any of my students. Hey, you 2 must be doing something incredible for Eraser. How did you 2 meet Aizawa? To believe you were capable, Midnight inquired. Izuku stated, in reality, we met because he was saving us. Present Mike and Midnight glanced at their companions. They had not received any updates regarding Eraserhead taking part in rescue efforts of any kind. Present Mike remarked, well, you must be something if he offers to train you afterwards. Stop talking, or else I'll let Bakugo show you 2 how he does it. Eraserhead remarked, Recovery Girl detests caring for burn injuries. Midnight then, against her better judgment, remarked, oh, the child must have a pretty excellent quirk if you believe he will fulfill that threat. No, you shouldn't be concerned about my peculiarity, even though it would be amusing to make you. Bakugo laughed, turns out to be F-432 ing pinatas. Well, now I'm curious, said the radio host as Midnight and Present Mike turned to face Izuku. What is the peculiarity of the green listener? Midnight said, me do. Can we have a demonstration? With a sigh, Eraserhead turned to face Izuku and said, it's up to you. I know you've been wanting to practice limiting and controlling your anti-quirk. Present Mike and Midnight both said, that's an odd term, anti-quirk. Bakugo growled and said, good going, you're hobo. Izuku said, "It's okay. They're Eraserhead's friends and pro-heroes. You can let them down." Present Mike and Midnight were gradually lowered to the ground by Eraserhead as Izuku walked up to them slowly. "This may be a little startling," he said, rubbing his hands together. However, as soon as Izuku gently put his hands on their shoulders, the world fell silent for Midnight, and Mike felt a little drowsy. Present Mike screamed, "What the hell?" But his quirk didn't work as it usually did when the Present Mike voice began to go hoarse. "Wait, my quirk, it didn't activate." "Your quirk was as effective as Eraser." Izuku pulled his hands away and shook his head. All of the noise struck the Present Mike at once. And Midnight immediately woke up again. "It wasn't long before Eraserhead referred to my abilities as an anti-quirk. As you can see, the genetic alterations brought on by my peculiarities are entirely reversed. Genetic code. According to my doctor, the typical ABCD before ZYXW is not just different, but set aside just for me. My genetic makeup surrounds me with an aura of anti-quirk, anything made or I can't be affected by someone's quirk, and if I touch someone, my anti-quirk will come out. Cancels or suppresses their quirk. However, I usually only discuss quirks that don't affect quirk of mine, and call it null. Wait, you can't get those quirk-canceling cuffs from this green bean. Were specifically provided by Yaoya Corp? Asked Midnight. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck and remarked, "It's a synthetic copy of my blood." "Oh, you won't happen to be able to call the CEO and get us a special pair, won't ya?" Present Mike inquired. 20 questions is enough. Bakugo and Midoriya are here to train, so unless you go, if you feel like joining them, Eraserhead said. I don't believe so. We don't need to listen to you because we now know your secret. At the very least, you want us to show everyone in UA that you genuinely care, so I believe we'll sit in watch for a while, said Midnight. "Do I still get to practice my explosions if they stay?" Bakugo inquired. After glancing at Bakugo, Eraserhead turned slowly to face Present Mike and Midnight, his eerie smile. "Yes, you get to throw an ad every time they sit and watch you clean up this beach." Blast directed at them. Present Mike jokingly said, "And you think we're just going to stand still for that?" "No, I won't have to worry about him getting hurt because I'll have Midoriya hold you in place." Eraserhead said, "You had better start helping with the cleanup if you want to stay." Present Mike and Midnight exchanged glances before deciding whether or not to spend time together. They would tolerate helping to clean up the beach with Izuku and Bakugo. However, did Eraserhead not have a plan for his two obnoxious friends? As soon as they arrived, the following Saturday, he persuaded Present Mike and Midnight to assist Izuku with his training and Bakugo in the storage facility. The more time Present Mike and Midnight spent with Bakugo and Izuku, they learned more about Eraserhead's concept of pro-hero potential. Bakugo never wavered. He had a purpose and didn't waste any movement during the sparring matches. Attentive to the plan, which was demonstrated by his frequent attempts to keep the beach clean, removing whichever trash he was working on with a different piece. And Izuku was there. He lacked Bakugo's domineering presence and his explosion quirk, but he could mean it when the moment demanded it. Izuku could effortlessly remove the gloves, literally and figuratively pin Present Mike or Midnight to the ground in a matter of seconds. Additionally, he never let himself rest until he got rid of whatever trash piece he was ready to be dragged into the trash can after pushing. It made no difference if it was an old desk or Izuku didn't pause or let the old mattress fall to the ground until he was standing next to the garage bin. As Izuku and Bakugo grew taller and stronger over time, all of this added up. However, Izuku had adopted stealth and ran with it, and so did their combat skills. Something Eraserhead persisted, having Izuku practice on the shore while Present played a game of tag. Midnight and Mike. Izuku found it simple to move stealthily around the beach while it was still covered, but Izuku had to exercise more caution as the piles dwindled and became smaller. The entrance exam follows. Present Mike and Midnight, however, remained silent regarding the exam. Eraserhead revealed that it was more designed for the ostentatious and destructive peculiarities, which only one of the two boys possessed, so Bakugo made a commitment in front of the three professional heroes who would enter Hero High if Izuku didn't join UA. Izuku did enter the school. The boy was reassured by Eraserhead that such extreme measures would not be required. Additionally, prior to The teams were aware that the UA entrance exam was approaching, the morning of the entrance examination. Present Mike was trying to make his presentation happen while he was finishing up the preparations. Distinctive each year, and Midnight assisted in establishing the various stations that would guide the middle schoolchildren to their destination. Eraserhead made his way to Principal Nezu's office during this time, as he was. Izuku was certain that he would never give up and would keep pushing himself until the time came, however. The memories of his own entrance exam were ingrained in Eraserhead's mind, and over the years, it had only become more difficult. Eraserhead had to struggle to get into general class through the sports festival and was moved because he was the clear favorite to win, leaving him at his mercy because the final match's commencement, and despite all of the pupils Eraserhead had taught, he had never experienced such potential as he possessed in Izuku, and he refused to let it be postponed due to a foolish test. The HPSC was adamant about staying the same. Eraserhead approached Principal Nezu's office and held up his hand to knock, but he hesitated as anticipating that, as was customary when visiting the rat, Principal Nezu would greet him early. However, following Eraserhead knocked on the door after Principal Nezu failed to call out for a few seconds. "Yes, who is?" inquired Principal Nezu. Had the rat not anticipated this, Eraserhead would have hesitated. Eraserhead yelled, "It's Eraserhead, sir." Principal Nezu said, "Ah, Shota, yes, come in." Eraserhead pushed the door open, saying, I'm shocked that you're skipping your typical pre-test nap. No, I decided it would be best to turn in early last night so I could be there to speak with you regarding a very significant issue," Shota Aizawa stated. "Yes. What topic would you like to talk about?" said Principal Nezu. "A middle school student is scheduled to enroll in the hero course today, but because of the circumstances surrounding the tests, I know it is highly unlikely that he will achieve a Mr. Aizawa stated, passing score. "What is this middle school student's name?" said Principal Nezu. After a pause, Mr. Aizawa said, "Izuku Midoriya." With a smile on his face, Principal Nezu took an examen certification out of a drawer sheet with a picture of Izuku on it. "That won't happen to one of the middle. You took the schoolchildren to training over the weekend. Your pals told me about your potential. Observed those too, but they remained silent about these names. However, the hero's examinee. I was interested in the entrance exam. Midoriya Izuku. The quirk in his file is called Null. The ability to keep any quirk from hurting its user directly. Won't you say that it has a quirk that is too similar to Eraser? It would probably come. It would be a stretch to say that the Eraser wielder was training given a similar struggle. The Null wielder. However, Principal Nezu reached back into the drawer, so it wasn't over yet. But how in the world of 1,000 quirks could Eraser find, he said, taking out a newspaper. Null. Eraserhead saw the headline when Principal Nezu placed the newspaper on his desk. The biggest secrets of Yaoya Corp. It was an article about the kidnapping of Momo, Bakugo, and Izuku. Izuku Midoriya may be the same person trying out for UA as the one who was. Eraserhead saved them. Maybe forcing the Momo Yaoyorozu to accept the suggestion that. Likewise, Katsuki Bakugo is attempting to enroll in the hero course. How did UA? Eraserhead started to inquire. Principal Nezu remarked, I noticed you in the background of another article, but back to the issue at hand. Today, a middle school student with eraser-like skills is present, just as the expert. The principal of the very high school that the middle school is attempting to get into is speaking with the hero with eraser. Maybe you're here to grovel on his behalf so he doesn't have to endure a semester in general, just like you used to. Maybe you want me to reduce the number of points he needs to pass, or offer him a particular favor. Before the test starts, make sure he is aware of the rescue points. Ask him to. Like the recommendation test, but with a pro hero in the opposite situation, it would be Null. Eraserhead looked at Principal Nezu, who said, it's hard for the pro hero to hurt him. He had never been more done with the world. Are you done? I'm not here to ask, Eraserhead said, and Principal Nezu nodded. You should be gentle with the child. After all the work he's done since I've known him, it won't be right. I'm here to request that you meet him following the exam. Speak with him, you might be impressed. As well. After giving it some thought, Principal Nezu said, I'm intrigued by your proposal. If you possess a. How can I contact Midoriya? I'll speak with him soon after the test. In another area of the UA campus, middle school graduates were coming to take Take the various tests to gain admission to the various courses that UA offers. General, Hero, Support and Business. Students were scanning their tickets at the front gate and making their way to the matching auditorium. After scanning their tickets, Bakugo and Izuku were shown to Auditorium A. Approached Auditorium A and saw Midnight at the entrance, assisting any students who had gone missing. Providing each student taking the entrance exam for the hero course with a lanyard, pencil, and eraser. Izuku and Bakugo approached Midnight and presented their tickets. "Oh, those boys are unnecessary. Present Mike and I have been searching for you. I'm eager to see what you have planned for the practical. I'm sure you'll draw attention," Midnight said. Looking at Bakugo blankly, Izuku questioned, "How disruptive do you think it would be if I unintentionally put her to sleep for the remainder of the day? Since it was found that the sensation of if Izuku suppressed her quirk, Midnight's drowsiness could put her to sleep. Sustained it long enough," Bakugo said. "It's best not to ruin your chances before the test even starts." He swiped a Midnight offered him a lanyard after taking a pencil and eraser from the table. Then, under the threat. Even though Izuku was wearing gloves, Midnight took care not to touch him. A thing that gave Izuku a smile. After that, Midnight led them into the auditorium and told them to locate a seat. The same numbers as those on their lanyard. Bakugo and Izuku went upstairs until they located their chair and took a seat. Waiting for the presentation was now the only thing left to do. Start. And after 20 minutes, when the auditorium was nearly full, the lights started to dim, and the stage was illuminated by the spotlight. When the exam taker's chatter subsided, Present Mike abruptly emerged on the shouted, "Can I get a heyo?" on stage. Present Mike had previously received complete silence, but one year the staff members played cricket noise after sneaking in a speaker, which the presenter Mike was upset about. Months on end because it received a greater response than his debut. However, he was so this year that he would receive responses from at least 2 people, those 2 listeners he had grown to like. Present Mike was greeted with silence once more, as though he had been cursed. His eyes spotted it immediately. Bakugo and Izuku. Bakugo was using his hand to stifle a laugh, and Izuku shook his head as though to apologize. Present Mike's recuperation took a little longer, but he was able to move on to his presentation. He clarified that the written exam would take an hour and a half, followed by a 30-minute. Before the students were taken to the site of their practical exam, there would be a 1-minute break. Finally, Present Mike clarified that in order to start the written exam, everyone had to just slide their lanyard into the slot on the right armrest. Then a big timer showed up behind Present Mike on a screen and started clocking down. Everyone in the auditorium was in a panic. Retrieved their tests from a concealed compartment after scanning their lanyard. However, Izuku and Bakugo were able to do so because Eraserhead had taught them to remain composed at all times. To stay that way after they got their test and scanned their lanyard, they maintained their composure as they noticed Present Mike's warning about how difficult the first question was. Although not unjustified, the written portion of the hero entrance exam was not an easy task. Still, Izuku and Bakugo exchanged glances and grinned, demonstrating their confidence. Izuku and Bakugo picked up pencils and began going through a packet of inquiries. Every question was challenging, but manageable, and when the allotted time came, each question had been answered by 2 of them, who also had an opportunity to go over the question again. They had made a note to return to. After that, the test takers were instructed to give their packets back to the concealed space. Present Mike then gave his presentation after all of the tests were returned. Regarding the robots that the middle school students would encounter in the practical, Izuku froze as the presentation continued. He remembered Eraserhead's discussion of the entrance exam is designed to be more flamboyant and offensive. However, Izuku didn't think this would happen. The practical exam's robots were specially designed to and constructed at UA. Thus, they wouldn't be impacted by a standard punch, but Izuku wasn't alone in being disadvantaged. People with strange minds are those who only have an impact on living things. They will also be incapable of managing the robots. Bakugo took hold of Izuku's forearm during his panic and muttered, "Remember, Ua or nothing." Izuku became somewhat calmer as a result. There were other hero high schools in Japan besides Ua, and if Izuku would take his anti-quirk somewhere else if they failed to see its potential, Izuku could take the rejection as motivation to keep going, until he was a leading professional hero. And demonstrated to UA that their rejection of him was incorrect. Your lanyards bear the imprints of each of the exam areas you were given. Good luck and present, Mike said, happy hunting, and vanished behind the curtain. There was nothing more he desired. Then to speak with Izuku in exam area D. On the little listener's face, he could see the understanding how messed up he and a lot of other people without any physical peculiarities were in the hero entrance examination. Mike wanted to speak with Izuku, explain the rescue locations, and provide the little listener a method to pass the test. However, UA teachers were not permitted to favor anyone, not even themselves. Pupils. Present Mike and Midnight had no choice but to observe and hold out hope, and while they were permitted, Eraserhead tried to discuss the matter with Principal Nezu. The rat didn't taking feelings into consideration when making a choice. Present Mike inhaled, then turned away from the curtain and made his way to the door. Walked over to the observation area. Midnight followed him as he went, asking, so how did they look? They completed the written exam quickly and remained composed the entire time, but when I could see that Bakugo was confident as ever when practice came up, but why wouldn't he be? Midoriya appeared disappointed, and I believe he would have experienced a nervous breakdown if Bakugo had not grounded him. Shota would have to reason with the mouse before UA could. Two students with limitless potential could be lost with ease. They quickly found the other first-year teachers in the observation room. Present Mike and Midnight sat down on either side of Eraserhead and Midnight while they waited. Murmured, are you going to speak with him? I was able to get Midoriya to meet him. It's all on the child, so forget about it. Eraserhead. The two were somewhat relieved because they had known Izuku for 3 years and he had always fervently discussed his desire to be a pro-hero, the people he wished to assist, and the hope he could motivate. Present Mike and Midnight looked up at the monitor, scanning them until they saw. It appeared as though Izuku was consoling a girl while he was sitting beneath a tree. Present Mike then muttered, do you think her peculiarity affects the young listener? In a whisper, Midnight said, I have no idea. Principal Nezu entered the observation room as the door abruptly opened. At this point, Mike, I do think the break is almost over. Let's see what this year has in store. Has introduced UA. Present Mike said, yes sir. He then took a microphone and said, begin. As usual, none of the test takers shifted, caught off guard by the sudden and abrupt beginning. There is no real-world countdown. You may not be aware of it, but it seems like we have some examinees who wish to merit it. Izuku had just gotten off the bus at exam site D and was making his way to the general space in front of 2 enormous metal doors that seemed to be the mock city's entrance. He looked. Many people were waiting for something while others were taking the appropriate item and getting ready by warming up, but Izuku then saw a girl who had moved away. She sat beneath a tree, her head resting on her knees, and she separated herself from the crowd. Seemed to be in tears. Izuku believes that she must be in a similar situation, possessing a peculiarity that won't work against the. She must have been hoping to get into UA like Izuku, but she discovered that society didn't see. Izuku sighed, realizing she needed some consolation, and he described her quirk as appropriate for a professional hero. Izuku took care to avoid running into anyone while he was making his way to the girl. Then he left the crowd and approached her, saying, as he approached, I suppose he's a hopeful fool fighting for a lost cause. How about it? The girls remarked as her prismatic hair was illuminated by the sun, giving it the appearance of similar to stained glass. As he sat cross-legged, Izuku remarks, well, this time this lost cause has 2 hopeful fools opposite her. Hold on. The girl raised her head slightly and asked, I should probably introduce myself. I'm sorry. My name is Midoriya Izuku, Izuku declared. Tora remarked, Hagakure, Toru. I guess since you're over here, you don't think you'll have a chance in the coming test. Izuku said. Yes. Toru stated, my quirk doesn't make me strong or fast, all that it does is. Her arms out to introduce herself. Izuku examined her but saw no unusual behavior other than. Did her peculiarity affect light in any way? Her hair was prismatic. You mentioned that you were also optimistic. Idiot. What is the purpose of your quirk? It's known as null. It ensures that I am not impacted by the peculiarities of others. For example, if a villain used. I won't be burned by their peculiarity of shooting fire at me. However, it's not that effective, as you can imagine. Opposed to robots, Izuku uttered. Then we can stay together and not waste our time since we won't be able to pass, Toru said. Stated. Normally, but I still believe the effort would be worthwhile. Demonstrate our fortitude and. Izuku stated, I'm willing to stand even in the worst situation, but it was clear that it lacked the. There's a lot of quirks like ours out there, was the effect he was aiming for. Others examined us and don't believe we're worthy of being considered heroes. There must be many people who share our peculiarities. That share the same viewpoint. However, a startling few do occasionally appear. Their peculiarities aren't. Practically speaking, they are unable to move at lightning speed or take down a building with a single blow. However, they, in any case, make an effort to disprove others. Instead of simply holding their ground, they continue to move ahead until they turn into professional heroes and demonstrate their abilities to the world. It would be awesome if we could join the select few. Show that we are capable of becoming pro-heroes, not due to our peculiarities, but also our willpower and capacity to overcome another obstacle in our path with a grin. Toru inquired, and who are those surprise few? Eraserhead is the best. He can erase the peculiarity of anyone he sees, and he's the homeroom teacher of Class 1A. Therefore, wouldn't it be something if we were to attend his class? Possess a teacher who can relate to us, recognizes our challenges, and can help us develop into. The world told us we couldn't become pro-heroes, Izuku remarked. I guess, said Toru. Then how about we disprove the world? Izuku said, extending his gloved hand. Collectively, Izuku's gloved hand caught Toru's attention. Slowly, she extended her arm and took it, while the PA system came to life as they started to stand up, and the presenter mic said, Go. Izuku took control of Toru's hand and moved toward the big metal doors that were now accessible. Izuku lifted all the heavy trash, but he was certain that he had tightened his grip too much. Had given him a very strong grip. Izuku was certain that Toru would later appreciate him for making. She was among the first two individuals in the fictitious city. Toru was dragged down the street by Izuku until they encountered a one-point robot. As they launched a missile at Izuku, the one-pointer robots exclaimed, Target found. Target locked. Toru followed Izuku as he dove behind an overturned car. I believe it only saw me. Leave now, Hagakure, while I attract its wrath. Score points. But above all, be careful, Izuku remarked, surveying the overturned vehicle at the one-point robots. Present Mike claimed that the one-pointers were the easiest to destroy, even though it was aware of his position. Because their armor was thin and they moved slowly, Izuku's gaze landed on a shoved manhole cover. Out of position, since Izuku lacked a quirk, he would take advantage of his surroundings. Izuku picked himself up and headed for the covered manhole. Izuku was sprinting for the metal disc when he was hit by two missiles from one-pointers. After jumping over the first one, Izuku struck the ground and the second one rolled beneath it. Izuku grabbed the manhole cover as he emerged from his roll. Izuku could feel all the dirt and grime on its moist underside, but after all those years of training Izuku became less sensitive to such things at the beach. Izuku held onto the manhole cover and whirled around on his feet, once. After completing a rotation, Izuku tightened his right arm before throwing the manhole at the one-pointer. The one-pointers were struck by the manhole, which became embedded in the robot's chassis, and it started to raise its arms once more as it stumped over a little. Even though it was moving more slowly and its arm was twitching, it was still useful. Furthermore, Izuku was certain that points were only awarded in the event that the robot was totally destroyed. Izuku sighed as he launched himself at the robot, ducked its last missile, then leapt up and dropped. Kicked the cover of the manhole. Although the manhole cover didn't burst out of the back, it must have struck the power core because the robot's lights went out and it dropped to the ground. In order to avoid squashing it, Izuku had to quickly roll to the side. Izuku picked himself up after that. He could hear other people entering the fictitious city. The initial shock appeared to have been defeated, and Izuku would now need to put in more effort to earn any additional points. However, as others frantically searched for robots to apply their peculiarities to, Izuku. Inhaling, he glanced at the one-pointer he had just won. Additionally, given the amount of work he knew it would probably be useless to try to face that thing, so he had to use to power it down. Against either a two-pointer or a three-pointer, he would therefore have to prepare the one-pointer's bread and butter, which required being aware of their inner workings, specifically knowing what precisely where and what the power source was. He would then know where to concentrate all of his assaults. Izuku ripped the manhole cover from the 1-point's chassis and grabbed it, looking via the opening he had made. Since Izuku had not pursued any engineering studies, he didn't. Even though he was aware of the innerworks level of operation, he was still able to identify a power source, seeing beyond. Izuku noticed a big black box containing all the mechanical and wiring components. A container that seemed to have been punctured by Izuku's most recent assault. Since that had been the source of power, Izuku would need to focus all of his attacks. However, it wasn't going to work to constantly throw a manhole cover and then have to drop kick it. Always to work. Izuku noticed a broken stop sign while scanning the area, hurrying to it. Izuku examined it. The sign's bottom was broken into a sharp point, but the majority of it was still intact. Point. Izuku threw the broken sign at the 1-pointers who were powered down while holding it like a spear. When Izuku approached to examine it, he noticed that a sign had penetrated the armor's outer shell. By now, it had nearly reached the big black box. Thus, it would only be a single blow, but Izuku would need to exert more force during his throws. However, there was a minor problem, as Izuku, when he attempted to remove the sign, he discovered that it was stuck and that he would not be able to do so. Out. Izuku sighed, but don't worry, he could find plenty of broken metal poles for use. Principal Nezu observed Izuku in the observation room. I'm curious to be the first to the city before putting himself to the test against the 1-pointers. The manhole cover was unexpectedly used. Izuku knew that wasn't the best option, but Principal Nezu could see it in his eyes. However, Izuku didn't have much time to waste trying out because the practical test was only 10 minutes long. It was the best method. He had to find one that was quick and effective. As Izuku experimented with using metal debris as spears, Principal Nezu walked, and it appeared the anti-quirk user was pleased with its effectiveness. Thus, as others hurled their eccentricities at the robots, with the best of intentions, Izuku searched for metal poles to use, and as soon as he found discovered one, he would look for a 1-pointer to avoid using it. Although it took a while, it was finished in 8 minutes. 12 points had been added to Izuku. A small sum, given the minimal requirements to be admitted into. Despite being 60, the hero course was commendable for someone who had never used a quirk. Time. Then something striking happened. A student in middle school who was sporting a belt with a crystal buckle had. He targeted 2-point robots with his quirk. One that was already missing a few of its legs, and it was threatening to topple over. However, the middle school student failed to notice that those legs were obstructed by perspective. Izuku saw, but then he saw something else, given how the other examinee behaved. The laser that emerged from his belt was aimed from the head of the 2-pointer. However, the 2-pointer was falling, so the laser attack would strike the wall behind the 2-pointer instead of hitting it. The only thing preventing a big cement building from toppling over was a cement wall. The entire building would collapse if the laser struck the wall and broke it. Possibly other people who were nearby. Izuku ignored his makeshift spear and swore in his mind. He must move out of the way of that assault. He was confident that his anti-quirk would be able to handle the laser and that he would be alright. Izuku caught a glimpse of the other examinee preparing to shoot. Izuku leapt up on the exterior of a car and leapt into the laser's path with all of his strength. Izuku stretched his body as wide as he could in midair. Izuku was struck by the laser in the chest, but Izuku's anti-quirk swiftly put an end to it as expected. Merde. You blocked my shot. Were you hoping to take the points for yourself? The examinee in French shouted. No, the 2-pointer was already shutting off. Your assault would have been, Izuku said, meaningless, as he raised himself up, revealing that his shirt only had a minor burn mark. You would have missed and removed the wall behind the 2-pointer, which would have resulted in the constructing on top of it to fall on us. Izuku turned to face the 2-pointers, which were now reduced to a pile of metal on the floor. After examining it, the French examinee concluded that his attack would have removed the wall behind it, ignoring it. Additionally, it seemed that the wall was supporting a lot of weight to destroy it. My mistake, monsieur. The French examinee bowed slightly before leaving. Locate his next victim.
I will continue this story next part. Till then, bye bye.